Every person has a soul. One day, people learned that the soul has its own essence, anima. Sometime later, they learned to manifest it in the form of various abilities. But not everyone had a strong anima. Because of the emerging distribution of ranks, people whose anima was too weak began to be despised. Since E rank was the lowest class of society, they were treated the worst. Schools became a tool to raise the status of the country, and during military operations, people with the highest ranks were sent to the front lines. The school where our main character studies was no exception. Students with strong abilities often chose to be bullied in order to prove their superiority. But today, Michael and his friends were unlucky enough to choose a target that was beyond their capabilities. Jumping up, John created a huge iron axe. Smiling, he quickly approached Michael. The guy himself froze in place. He was amazed that his opponent turned out to be stronger than he expected. Coming to his senses, he created a tonfa in each hand to hold back John's attack. The next moment, the iron axe collided with the iron tonfa, producing a characteristic sound. Due to the oppressive force of the enemy, it was difficult for Michael to stay in this position for too long. He turned to Ethan, who was standing to the side, wondering why he was simply watching everything in this situation. Our hero was in no hurry to answer Michael. However, a couple of seconds later, scratching the back of his head, he said that he would not be able to help him in any way. These words made Michael even more angry, and he promised that he would definitely deal with him later. The next day, Michael, as promised, decided to deal with his wayward classmate. He asked how long Ethan was going to continue to cause them problems. He was disgusted even by the thought that someone so weak was in their class. Our hero apologized, saying that one cannot expect anything from someone who is in last place. His words infuriated Michael. Gathering all his strength in his fist, he was about to hit Ethan, hoping that he would die and go to hell, but our hero managed to safely dodge. He said that wishing for death was too harsh, so he asked if simply admitting his guilt would be enough. Sean, standing behind Michael, began to roll up his sleeves, saying that Ethan should get 10 strokes for each member of their team. Sighing, the hero realized that he would be beaten for the entire break, so he had no choice but to run away. Other classmates laughed as they watched this scene. However, Ethan was unable to escape from his classmates. He was surrounded at the exit from the classroom. One of the guys said that using abilities in school is prohibited, so Ethan shouldn't even try to counter them. Immediately after this, our hero received a strong blow to the chest. Others watched Ethan's beating, saying that this was the only treatment an F rank deserved. They genuinely didn't understand why someone like him would come to school and disgrace their class. Slowly rising from the floor, Ethan said that it wasn't his fault Michael's team lost. Sean was about to hit our hero again, wondering how Ethan dared to contradict them so brazenly. At that moment, the door opened and their form teacher, Mr. Thomas Reed, entered, announcing from the doorway that he had good news. Due to the teacher's arrival, Sean and Michael had to leave Eton and return to their seats. Noticing that Mr. Reed was too cheerful today, the students asked what it was about, and someone shouted out the suggestion that their teacher was finally getting married. Our main character managed to get up from the floor during this time and sit down in his place. Thomas saw that the hubbub in the classroom was not going to stop anytime soon and got everyone's attention by slamming his fist on the chalkboard, telling everyone to listen carefully. After that, everyone became silent, and he said that their school had been recognized by the state. Glenn assumed that they had once again received some stupid offer from a dubious organization. When he asked how long they would continue to participate in something like this, the teacher approached him and said that it was not up to him to decide and that they would just have to accept what was happening. Mr. Reed said it was all down to the achievements of senior pupils. Afterwards, he returned to the board and announced that from that day on, the school would become a training ground for combat exercises, so all students would be divided according to military rank. Everyone listened attentively to their teacher, amazed that the school had actually agreed to this. Meanwhile, Mr. Reed continued, saying that from this moment on, his charges would become comrades in arms. He also said that all the teachers were given a title, so now he should be called the commander of the 10th platoon. Glenn asked what would happen to the students in the future. The man replied that there would most likely be many people willing to take on graduates of this school, after which he said that they needed to make every effort to attract someone more influential to their side. Ethan asked what would happen if one of the students did not want to be a soldier. Mr. Reed looked at the boy who asked him the question for a few seconds, taking his time answering. After which he said that no one is forced to become a soldier against their will. If someone does not want to take part in this, then they should send a request to transfer to another school. The man said that Ethan should carefully consider the presented opportunity to transfer because he himself understands his situation. The hero was about to answer something, but he was interrupted. The classmates sitting in front of him demanded an explanation from Mr. Reed for the reason why their school had been made a military school so suddenly. Taking a box out of his desk, the teacher replied that he had mentioned earlier that the 11th graders had done well. As Mr. Reed poured the contents onto the desk, he explained that they had helped to give the school military status and had all been promoted to sergeant. The next moment, everyone saw on one of the desks a multitude of student cards indicating their rank. Patting one of his charges on the shoulder, Mr. Reed said that the 11th graders were the hope for a bright future for their country. Handing out a ticket to each student, the teacher said that only the best of his charges would receive the rank of corporal, while all the rest would receive the rank of lance corporal. After handing out tickets to everyone except Ethan, he announced that the platoon commander could reevaluate ranks at any time. Our hero turned to Mr. Reed to ask a question, but the man ignored him, continuing his speech. Ethan made another attempt to ask why he was not given a ticket. With his back to him, Mr. Reed said that in the entire school there was only one student who had failed to achieve the rank of private. What he heard greatly surprised our main character. Turning to him, the teacher said that Ethan would just be a greenhorn. The hero was not at all happy with his new title, which foreshadowed even more bullying from his classmates. After class, Mr. Reed called Ethan into the teacher's lounge. While looking through the documents, the man said that they needed to discuss Ethan's future. He admitted that he would not be able to help such a hopeless student and suggested that the hero change schools. The boy was shocked when he was offered to change schools. After looking at the documents, the teacher explained that even regular schooling was not easy for Ethan, and if we were talking about military training, he simply would not be able to handle the load. Ethan said that if Mr. Reed helped him realize his potential, there was a chance he would succeed. After his words, the man looked at the guy in surprise. The next moment he laughed, saying that Ethan had a good sense of humor. The hero was unpleasant to realize that the teacher had paid attention to him for the first time only to laugh. After calming down, Mr. Reed said that the ranking system would make it even more difficult for Ethan to survive in this school, and as a teacher, he could not help everyone. After these words, the hero's assumption that Mr. Reed was aware of all the bullying was confirmed, and it became obvious that he simply did not want to have an F-rank student. It was also not difficult to understand that the man secretly hoped that constant insults would force Ethan to give in. He asked the teacher his opinion on whether souls could be divided into ranks. The man laughed at his question, the answer to which was too obvious. Of course, souls are also divided by rank. After receiving the teacher's answer, Ethan clenched his fist. Looking at Mr. Reed, he said that he did not agree with this statement. As soon as the break was over, the teacher and our hero returned to the classroom, where he announced that since the classes were now divided into squads, each sergeant must report on attendance. Turning around, Anna counted everyone who was in her squad and reported that there were 10 people in the first squad. No one was missing. Next was Michael. He said that there were 11 people in his squad with no missing people. Watching them, Ethan couldn't understand what all these army games were for. Mr. Reed asked the remaining third squad to report. Glenn raised his hand and asked if that was all he had to do, to which the man replied that he had to follow the orders of his superior. The guy sighed and replied that there were 10 people in total. 2 were missing and 1 was a loser. Leaning back in his chair, he summed up that there were 8 people in his squad, which caused laughter among his classmates. All eyes were on Ethan, who was no longer even considered human. The hero was already accustomed to various kinds of bullying, so he simply ignored all the ridicule directed at him. The teacher didn't pay any attention to this either, and announced that instead of lessons today, there would be an event in the field. He said that government spies are hiding in the school, but even the teachers don't know where exactly. They will observe how the students react to such sudden changes. Mr. Reed was interrupted and asked to get to the point. Sighing, the man said that fights would be held among the school students. All the teams were assigned by the administration. Eliza said with disappointment that if only 11th graders fought among themselves, then their class would no longer be interesting to anyone. Ethan, on the other hand, was glad that he would be able to while away the time by watching the fights. Suddenly, Mr. Reed asked what rank Glenn's ability was. The guy irritably replied that he had a C rank. Afterwards, the man asked what rank his fighting ability was. Questions about his strength irritated Glenn, and he asked why there were so many questions because even without them, it was obvious that he could defeat anyone. Mr. Reed approached his charge and, placing his hand on his shoulder, said that in that case his first battle would be against the 11th graders of the first squad. Realizing who he was about to fight, a stunned Glenn jumped up from his seat. Mr. Reed, meanwhile, told everyone except the third squad to go to the field, after which he announced that Glenn's squad had 20 minutes to prepare. Everyone started to leave the classroom, wishing the third squad good luck. Glenn didn't know what to do because it was obvious that they couldn't stand up to the high school students who all received high ranks. Besides that, there was another factor that irritated him greatly, namely the fact that there was an F rank on his team. Rising from his seat, he walked towards Ethan, who was lying quietly on his desk. A couple of seconds later, Glenn stopped next to him. Rising from his desk, our hero asked what Sergeant Glenn needed. Glenn grabbed Ethan by the hair, saying that he was annoyed by this manner of communication. Coming closer, he said that if the hero did not want to get beaten up in advance, then he should change his manner of speaking. Afterwards, Glenn tossed Ethan aside, saying that the team they were about to fight had a real monster in Antonio. He said that it was difficult to defeat him even with a joint effort, but this time Ethan takes the place of a normal warrior, so the result of this battle is already obvious. The hero asked, confused, if they were going to lose anyway, then what use was he to them? Glenn grabbed Ethan by the tie, asking if he knew the difference between shame and mere defeat. Afterwards, he touched our hero's forehead, saying that if he were to fall in the rankings, it would be Ethan's fault. Turning away, the hero replied that Glenn's rank was not so high that he needed to worry about that. Holding back his irritation, Glenn knelt down next to Ethan, saying that he couldn't even give him a good beating right now because he was needed on the battlefield. Ethan smiled and asked what difference it made who ended up getting hit on the head by. Looking at his classmate, Glenn said that he would assign him one simple task, after which he sat down next to Ethan, asking if he could handle it. The hero replied that he would do whatever he was ordered to do. After receiving his answer, Glenn grabbed Ethan by the vest. He said that Ethan would become his human shield. A few minutes later, the third squad in full force was on the field. Before starting, Mr. Reed checked the microphone to make sure it was working. A few moments later, he announced the start of the battles between the squads. The teacher announced the leaders of both squads, between whom the battle would take place any minute. Even though Glenn took Ethan as his shield, he had a bad feeling about this. Approaching the leaders, Mr. Reed asked if their troops were ready to begin, and they nodded in agreement. The man turned to Antonio, telling him to show everything he could do today. Looking away, he explained that they were being watched by government intelligence agents today, so they couldn't afford to make a mistake. Antonio replied that his squad would do everything possible. After this, it was announced that the teams needed to take their starting positions. Glenn's squad didn't even expect to win this battle. They thought it was a waste of time. When all the participants stood opposite each other, Mr. Reed announced the start of the fights. He also announced that the leader of each squad should receive a bracelet. Glenn grabbed Ethan by the vest, telling him to follow him. He put the bracelet on our hero's hand, saying that it would help him last longer, because the bracelet uses the owner's strength for protection but breaks from a powerful blow. It was also announced that the rules usually say the one whose bracelet breaks is eliminated, but due to the difference in experience between the teams, a change was made to the rules. Ethan asked if he had to be held by the scruff of his neck like a cat, to which Glenn irritably replied that he should silently fulfill his role as a shield. Meanwhile, Mr. Reed announced that the victory would be counted to the team that could hold out for 5 minutes. For Glenn's team, this change did not make the situation any better, because none of them would be able to withstand the opponents for that long. Immediately after this, Ethan started the timer on his watch. Looking at the teacher, he thought that if his team won, then perhaps they would reconsider his transfer to another school. A few moments later, the leaders greeted each other. After this, Mr. Reed gave permission for the fight to begin. Glenn immediately grabbed Ethan and pulled him along with him. He rushed behind the backs of his comrades, hiding from his opponents. The guy hoped that this way he would be able to hold out for these 5 minutes. As Antonio's squad began to advance on them, one of the squad members asked what formation they were in. But moments later, no orders came from their commander, leaving everyone confused and unsure of what to do as the enemy began to surround them. Glenn shouted for everyone to shut up and just protect him. He had to last the allotted time for them to win. The next moment, Olivia kicked the enemy standing in front of her in the stomach, incapacitating him. Antonio also went on the attack. In a matter of seconds, Olivia managed to defeat several opponents and collect their bracelets. When the girl looked towards Ethan and Glenn, the latter was overcome with real horror. The next moment, she ran towards them. Glenn pulled Ethan even closer to him, telling him that he had to stop Olivia and protect him by any means necessary. The hero suggested running in the opposite direction to gain time. When he looked to the side, he saw a smiling teacher. The man said he would help him change schools. This infuriated our hero, so he broke free from Glenn's grip, standing in front of the approaching girl. When she was at a sufficient distance, he grabbed her hand, causing Olivia to be surprised. However, the next moment she materialized armor. A few moments later, her entire body was covered in armor, hiding the bracelet underneath. Ethan excitedly said that this armor suited Olivia perfectly. Her abilities were not only unimaginably strong, but she could also create something so beautiful. The girl interrupted him, telling him not to make a fool of himself because he was not as weak as he wanted to seem, since he was keeping up with her. In response to her words, he pointed at Glenn, saying that his leader was running away. While Olivia turned her attention to Glenn, Ethan checked the time on his watch and saw that there were still 3 whole minutes left. He tried to figure out how he could hold out all this time. When the girl turned to him again, he asked if he could call her sister. Judging by Olivia's lack of reaction, Ethan assumed she didn't like the offer and suggested that they could just be acquaintances. The girl told the hero to stop wasting time and show his ability. Ethan didn't know what to do and tried to get Olivia to talk in any way possible, which began to significantly irritate the girl herself. She again demanded that Ethan reveal his abilities. He seemed much stronger than his comrades. The hero asked her not to rush things. He said that she must be well aware of the importance of consistency, especially when meeting new people. Olivia couldn't listen to his empty chatter any longer and began to approach the guy with a murderous aura. Noticing her change in mood, Ethan said that he would reveal his ability to her. The next moment, a dim glow began to appear in his palm. Olivia froze in anticipation of what would happen next. Contrary to all her expectations, a small F-rank dagger materialized in his hand. She looked at the dagger for a few seconds, occasionally glancing at Ethan. Then she sighed heavily, running her hand over her face. When Olivia asked if Ethan was the F-rank loser, the boy nodded, confirming her guess. A strong disappointment washed over her. Despite everything, Ethan himself was proud of the dagger he had created, saying that it was no worse than an S-rank weapon. When the guy noticed that the girl turned around and headed in the opposite direction, he called out to her. Ethan screamed that she couldn't just leave when she insisted so hard to see his ability. The two ignored him and walked on. He made another attempt to stop her, shouting that if she didn't stop, he would sneak up behind her and attack her. Olivia turned around, saying that she didn't see the point in wasting time on an F-rank loser. However, something happened that she didn't expect. In a matter of seconds, Ethan was behind her with his blade raised. The girl froze in surprise, watching the blade approaching her. At the last moment, she put her hand in front of her, blocking the attack. Olivia watched as the blade slid across her armor, leaving a small scratch in its wake. Ethan smiled and said that his dagger was indeed sharp. Our hero's classmates, who were watching this scene, laughed, saying that Olivia was afraid of some weakling who couldn't even do any harm to her. The girl said that even though Ethan's reaction speed was not bad with his rank, it would not help him. Then she turned around, saying that she had seen everything she wanted. Watching her retreating back, Ethan thought that he had managed to buy himself a little more time. However, when he looked at his watch, he saw that only 1 minute had passed and he needed to hold on for another 2. Olivia was approaching Glenn at this time, who was backing away. Stepping back, he said that it would be better for her not to come near him. But the girl ignored his words and instantly appeared next to him, asking if he could prove to her that he was better than Antonio. At that moment, Glenn noticed a stone nearby. He was delighted by this and thought that it was a great chance because there were quite a lot of stones here. Olivia asked how exactly Glenn was going to prove his superiority. Glenn replied that since she was so interested, he would be happy to show her everything, after which he sat down and touched the ground, activating his ability. Olivia didn't understand what he was doing. Ethan, on the contrary, understood everything perfectly. He realized that Glenn had been hiding his true rank all this time. Our hero called out to Olivia, warning her that her opponent's technique was too dangerous. Glenn himself used extraction on one of the stones sticking out of the ground. A couple of seconds later, the guy towered over the girl, standing on a huge rock. Looking at Olivia, he said that the most interesting part of the show was about to begin, after which he used the swing ability, which allows the extracted object to be used as a weapon. Everyone watched what was happening in amazement. Olivia guessed that all this time her opponent had been running away, looking for a suitable stone for his ability. The next moment, he lifted the stone he had just been standing on up as if it weighed nothing, after which he threw it at the girl. He said that with this attack, he would get rid of Olivia and prove his superiority to everyone. Glenn was so caught up in his fantasies that he didn't notice someone else's presence behind him. The next moment, Antonio attacked him, knocking him to the ground. Glenn shouted that sneaking up on an enemy from behind was for weaklings. Noticing Olivia, who had managed to build a shield that prevented her from colliding with the stone, Glenn realized that she was stronger than he had assumed. Suddenly, the stone in front of her broke into many small pieces. Afterwards, the girl saw Antonio in front of her, who broke the stone with his ability. Olivia looked at him and said that this was her opportunity to prove herself, and he shouldn't interfere. The guy replied that it was too dangerous and that it was his duty to protect his subordinates. Olivia looked at him with displeasure and asked if he really thought she couldn't handle this situation on her own. Antonio replied that he was absolutely sure that the girl would have done a great job on her own, but the problem lay elsewhere. Looking behind him, he nodded towards Glenn, who was rushing towards him with a club, and said that this guy would not calm down so easily. Using his ability, Antonio instantly appeared behind Glenn and attacked him, throwing him over his back. Standing to the side, Ethan watched what was happening with interest. Suddenly, Antonio turned his attention to him, causing the hero to tremble. Ethan shouted out that he surrendered. He had no desire to fight someone like Antonio. The guy who came up asked why Ethan warned Olivia about the danger before Glenn attacked. The hero replied that their sergeant can sometimes overdo it without thinking about the consequences. Continuing to approach, Antonio said that Ethan was completely incapable of lying, who in turn retreated back, reminding him that he had given up a couple of seconds ago. However, Antonio ignored him and appeared next to Ethan, intercepting his hand with the blade. The hero of the hands, due to such an unexpected attack, released the weapon from his hands, pointing it upwards. But the next moment, the dagger was already on his right, and he grabbed it with his free hand. Ethan swung it at his opponent. Antonio had no choice but to let our hero go. After that, he jumped back to a safe distance. He looked at Ethan intently, studying him. Antonio took a defensive stance and asked who he really was. Ethan replied that he was an ordinary warrior from the 3rd Squad of the 10th Platoon who possessed an F-rank ability. Antonio wanted to say something, however. At that moment, our hero's attention switched from the enemy to his wristwatch, which showed that he would only have 1 minute to hold out. The guy asked what Ethan was looking at there. Instead of answering, our hero scratched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. Then he pointed towards the stands, saying that there was a crowd there just waiting for Ethan to make another mistake. Antonio realized that his opponent was just stalling for time and said that he hated people like him the most. When he asked why Ethan didn't want to at least try to win, the hero backed away from the boy, asking what he could do on his own. Antonio said it was advice, not a warning. Ethan asked if that made sense since he was only an F rank. Antonio said that at the end of the battle, the scouts will pick out the worst and send them to other schools. After his words, the hero began to approach his opponent, saying that he did not want to go to another school. When Ethan stopped, he said that he could not guarantee Antonio would stay alive since he had become his opponent. Immediately after this, a red aura began to surround our hero. It seeped out of his body, filling the surrounding space. The system reported that Ethan's physical indicators had increased 3-fold, and he could see not only the level of someone else's ability, but how it worked as well as its weaknesses. Ethan's condition will only return to normal if the enemy dies or his soul essence is completely destroyed. Our hero's true ability is a skill that can completely destroy an enemy and has an S rank. All this time, Antonio remained in place, watching the changes that were happening to the guy opposite. He guessed that the low-level dagger was just a part of the manifestation of his true ability. Turning his attention to Antonio, Ethan saw that the opponent's ability was only B rank, which was that he could catch any target. Antonio was shocked when our hero said that his ability was not as outstanding as he had previously thought. The guy realized that he needed to be careful with Ethan, since he was able to see the abilities of other people. Meanwhile, the hero, surrounded by an aura of murder, pointed a dagger at the enemy, saying that he could no longer endure and hold back. He asked if Antonio could stop him. Not having received an answer from his opponent, he again asked if he could handle this task. Feeling completely superior to his opponent, Ethan changed his position. Twirling the dagger in one hand, he waited for Antonio to make his move. The classmates who were watching this did not understand why those two were just standing there. Michael, who was starting to get annoyed by this, shouted at Antonio to go on the offensive because he had come to watch Ethan get beaten up. Antonio himself tried to determine how best to approach his opponent. Although our hero was not in a protected stance, he also had no open areas to strike. Olivia also felt this strange aura coming from Ethan. This guy no longer looked like the loser he had seemed to her at first. Looking at him, she felt fear. She tried to control her emotions, realizing that they had to help Antonio, and ordered everyone to attack Ethan. The next moment, everyone ran to carry out her order, attacking the enemy, but he deftly evaded them. Having surrounded the hero from all sides, Olivia finally managed to reach Ethan. The next moment, our hero found himself pinned to the ground by Olivia. Dissatisfied with what happened, Antonio asked the girl why she did it. She replied that she too was obliged to protect all members of the squad she belonged to. Antonio said that he did not need anyone's protection. Olivia's words about whether he was sure about this made him think. When the girl attacked him, the guy quickly moved away from the line of attack. He also avoided a trap set by other members of the squad. It all looked more like a cat playing with its prey. Straightening his tie, he replied that he wasn't sure if he could really handle Ethan on his own. Seeing the shadow of a smile on Antonio's face, Olivia was shocked and did not hear his words about how she had better dispel her ability before she got hurt. The next moment, her armor collapsed and began to disappear, leaving the girl confused. Others also didn't understand what was happening, watching as their bracelets began to break for no apparent reason. When Ethan noticed Antonio's gaze, he said that they had great teamwork. However, the guy continued to stare intently at the hero, making him wary. Antonio sighed and asked if Ethan had come to his senses. Ignoring this question, our hero turned to Olivia, saying that 5 minutes had already passed and they should get off him. Turning around, Antonio said that next time no one would disturb them. Ethan replied wearily that once was enough for him. However, Antonio ignored him, advising him to practice a little before their next meeting. With a resigned voice, Ethan shouted after the guy as he was leaving that this time was enough for him, and there was no point in them meeting again, but he was again ignored. Following their sergeant, the rest of the squad members hurried to leave the field. Left alone, our hero wearily sank to the ground. A shocked Mr. Reed announced the result of the fight, which was hard to believe. Glenn's squad had won. At the same time, an important conversation took place in the director's office. Director Roger handed over to his guest the documents he had requested earlier. Picking up a stack of documents containing the personal files of students, he came across a recently exposed 11th grade student, Antonio. Patrick noted that he didn't win a single award in middle school, but in high school, he won every single victory. After looking through all his data, he concluded that he was only able to get this far thanks to his rank. While looking at the other students' cases, his attention was drawn to the fact that one of the students had an F rank. He asked Principal Roger for details about this student. The man replied that Ethan was the lowest rank. After much discussion, they had to place this student in the combat class. Patrick became interested in this student. Turning the page over, he saw that there was a more detailed description, but the director said that it was not worth reading. In the special circumstances footnote, it was stated that Ethan lost his parents at age 8 and was unable to awaken his powers due to the shock, was then bullied by other relatives, and awakened his powers at age 10 when the family was burglarized. Something about this made Patrick uneasy, because usually all children awaken their abilities at the age of 8. He had never encountered other cases before where the awakening of a child's ability manifested itself later due to some circumstances. Patrick asked if Ethan's fighting abilities had changed since they were awakened, and the principal replied that when he came to school, he was still an F rank. Something about this guy's case was bothering him, and Patrick began to suspect that Ethan might be deliberately hiding his powers. Putting the stack of documents aside, he said he would like to meet the student in person. The director was surprised by such a request, and he hastened to tell that Ethan would soon change schools due to his low rank. The man then asked why it was decided to introduce military training into this particular school. Patrick froze when he heard this question. Faced with the warning look of his guest, the director became frightened, thinking that he had asked a question concerning a secret government project that was not supposed to be disclosed. He apologized, saying that he shouldn't have asked that question. Looking at the affairs of the two students who had caught his attention, Patrick replied that they were preparing for attacks from the north. And the system he introduced will help students change and become stronger. Every morning, our hero began the same way. He woke up exactly at 6 in the morning, after which he starts getting ready for school. In front of the mirror, he tells himself that today will be a good day, and at 6:30 he leaves the house. Because he has been given the cleaning duties, he has to go to school so early. This morning, at the entrance, he met other students who had come to school at such an early hour. Rumors of what happened yesterday spread throughout the school, so Ethan's name became on everyone's lips. Smiling, the girl said that most likely Antonio's team simply lost their vigilance yesterday, since they lost to someone like that. They couldn't believe that some loser had defeated 11th graders with a simple dagger. Upon arriving at his classroom, Ethan washed the board and then shook the chalk off the brushes, thinking that it would be better if they had regular whiteboards. Having finished with this, the hero moved on to washing the floors not only in the classroom but also in the entire corridor. Michael and Sean approached him a little later, the latter saying that Ethan's attempts to do at least something brought benefits to their team. Putting his hand on the hero's shoulder, he said that he had managed to surprise everyone greatly that day. Sean admitted that they didn't expect anything from Ethan back then, but somehow they managed to come out on top. After that, he left the classroom. During the next break, Glenn approached him. Ethan thought that they were going to start beating him again. However, contrary to his expectations, a classmate asked our hero to get him a handout on mathematics. Ethan was surprised that they weren't going to beat him up. He thought that because of what happened on the field back then, they stopped bullying him. The next day, students from parallel classes also began to approach him with various requests, such as doing their homework for them. Even though the bullying of him stopped, they began to use him for their own purposes, which exhausted our hero much more. When the lesson was over, Mr. Reed asked everyone not to leave. He reminded everyone that today was the last day to join the units. For the 10th grades, this was mandatory and there was no way to avoid it, so the teacher rushed his charges to make a choice. Ethan thought for a long time about what to choose and whether they would take him anywhere at all. Mr. Reed said those who did not choose anything would be given a separate interview. Everyone in the class started laughing at Ethan, saying that no normal unit would accept an F-rank fighter. Our hero did not attach any importance to their words. However, when he read the list of units offered to him, the former calm evaporated and was replaced by horror. All units in the list are directly related to the Army or the use of the ability. Many have already decided where they want to go and have even split into groups. Michael was no exception and immediately headed to the chosen unit to submit his application. Ethan was left alone in the class, still undecided where he should enroll. He had already studied the proposed list several times, but our hero did not see a solution to the current situation. Suddenly he noticed that in one of the divisions there were no rank restrictions, and there was no interaction with abilities. It was only intended for the development of physical abilities. Ethan decided to sign up here because he assumed it would only be regular physical training and there wouldn't be many people there. True, the hero found it strange that one unit was given an entire gymnasium, while others had to cram into smaller rooms, which caused discontent among some. When he approached the gym, he was surprised by the huge number of people crowded at the entrance. Ethan thought he had come to the wrong place. He looked at the sheet that indicated the location of the unit he needed to make sure it was in the right place. Suddenly, someone from the crowd shouted out that there was an F rank here, drawing everyone's attention to Ethan. Having looked at everyone, the hero realized that almost everyone here was from the 9th grade. He didn't understand why they were gathered here because they didn't have to join the unit. As everyone excitedly shouted that the leader was coming, Ethan moved closer to see who they were talking about. The next moment, he realized who exactly they were calling the leader and decided that he needed to leave here immediately. Antonio noticed Ethan's face among the crowd and walked towards him. Due to constant pushing, our hero was unable to get out of the crowd. He was accidentally pushed towards an approaching guy. Confronted by him, Ethan asked in confusion if Antonio was the leader of the training unit. He nodded, saying he didn't expect to see Ethan here. Our hero was convinced that he needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. He didn't want to cause a fuss if they fought with him in front of so many witnesses. This did not escape Antonio's keen eye, and he asked Ethan where he was going. The hero replied that he had made a mistake and had come to the wrong place. Ethan promised that he would go and look around here and return as soon as he found the office he needed. To his words, Antonio replied that there was nothing else nearby. He looked at Ethan for a few seconds before he made his guess that he had come here in the hopes that there wouldn't be many people here. The hero admitted that this was indeed the case, but there was too much crowd there, so he changed his mind about entering. Antonio replied that it was not so easy to get into his unit, so Ethan could not worry about a large number of participants. But even with these arguments, our hero refused, reminding that his abilities were too insignificant. The unit leader had no choice but to forcefully drag our hero inside. Heading to the middle of the room, Antonio said that he would now conduct the entrance test, which Ethan would take along with everyone else. Taking a quick look at everyone who wanted to join here, he was surprised that there were more people than usual today. Afterwards, he announced that the testing would consist of simply repeating a couple of exercises for Antonio, namely 30 burpees, 30 push-ups, 30 burpees again, and 30 squats. When Ethan heard that the one who would be able to pass would have to complete 10 approaches, he thought that it would be easier to die than to fulfill this condition. A few minutes later, the daredevils from the first group were already running out of steam, completing only the 3rd approach. Some were unable to continue and decided to give up. They chose this unit because they thought it would be easier to get into than others, but that turned out to be far from the case. Ethan stood to the side and watched this, realizing that he had made a huge mistake in deciding to come here. Looking at Antonio, who was doing all the exercises he had listed without any difficulty, without even slowing down for a second, the hero understood why they called him a monster. Looking across the hall, the hero could only sympathize with the exhausted students. A couple of minutes later, having stopped on the 4th approach, everyone gave up, unable to even stand up. After announcing that the first group had been eliminated, Antonio turned around, announcing that the second group would now begin testing. After his words, everyone recoiled from the guy in horror, confident that they would definitely not be able to cope with this impossible task. The girl standing next to our hero pushed him forward, saying that he would go first. Thus, only Ethan remained in front of Antonio while the others moved aside. Turning to the guy standing opposite, the hero asked if Antonio was really human, since he wasn't tired after doing so many approaches. Looking at Ethan, the unit leader said that he shouldn't try to stall for time like he did that time on the battlefield. Then he turned to those who had decided to sit on the sidelines and said that the second group could begin doing the exercises, ignoring all the disgruntled objections. A few minutes later, while doing the exercises, Ethan's attitude towards this introductory task changed. At home, he often trained on his own so that he could defend himself. Although the hero thought he was pretty good at sports, training face-to-face with Antonio awakened his competitive spirit. But unfortunately, our hero's stamina reserve was far from that of his opponent. At some point, Antonio said that the second group was stronger than the first, so he decided that they should speed up a little. Ethan was sure that this guy got pleasure from torturing other people in such a horrible way. After a minute of fast-paced action, everyone except Ethan decided to give up and now just watched what was happening. Seeing our hero perform approaches on par with Antonio, they couldn't believe that his abilities really had an F rank. Our hero had no intention of giving in to his opponent, so he performed exercise after exercise, struggling with his irritation towards Antonio. The unit leader himself was not even out of breath, calmly performing the exercises at the set pace. One of the observers lost count of how many approaches they were already doing, but the girl sitting next to him suggested that they were already on their 7th. Hearing this, others began to support Ethan, admitting that he was not as bad as people said. A smile also appeared on Antonio's face. He thought that it was not in vain that he had noticed this guy on the day of the battle. Ethan himself was already at the limit of his strength. Continuing with his exercises, Antonio said he was sure that the hero's reaction speed that day was not just a coincidence, but that his well-developed endurance helped him maintain his pace. After these words, Antonio sped up again, challenging Ethan. The hero could not believe that his rival was seriously determined to do this. Many thought that competing with a newcomer at such a speed was too cruel even for Antonio. But when they saw that Ethan was doing everything on par with the leader, they were very surprised. The second group began to support our hero, shouting that there was only a little left and he would succeed. As Antonio finished his final set, he praised Ethan for his excellent work. The next moment, joyful cries were heard in the hall. After finishing all the exercises, Ethan wanted to lie down and not get up. This pace was not usual for him. Congratulations poured in from the sidelines on the successful completion. He sank to the floor, thinking that since he had been praised, everything had not turned out so bad. Antonio, standing next to him, extended his hand to Ethan, saying that he had been accepted into the training unit. Grabbing the offered hand, the hero thanked the guy and said that it was enough for him. Picking him up from the floor, Antonio said that Ethan could come here to train starting tomorrow. Trying to pull his hand away, the hero repeated again that what he had received today was more than enough. Coming close to him, Antonio said that training together was much more effective, and besides, he had been waiting for a suitable opponent to appear for a long time. Ethan replied that if he had done even one more approach, he would have died, and also reminded that Antonio was irritated by people like our hero. Ignoring all his words, the guy slowly said that it took him a whole year to find a member for his unit. Ethan realized that he was not being heard at all, and that there was no point in arguing with Antonio. A few days later, our hero stayed after school to clean the classroom. He sighed heavily, thinking that he didn't want to go to training today. Ethan still couldn't believe that he had actually ended up in Antonio's unit, even though he absolutely didn't want to run into him ever again. Because of this, everyone's attention was now focused on our hero, which he didn't like very much. Every day, everyone and their dog started teasing him about the unit he chose. Some were jealous and tried to find out how he got to Antonio. Ethan tried to get out of training several times, but it was useless, because in such cases, Antonio did not leave our hero alone for a minute. For a moment, he considered breaking his arm, but he quickly dismissed this idea, realizing that even so, Antonio would not leave him alone. Lost in thought, Ethan didn't notice that there was someone else in the classroom the whole time. When the hero finally paid attention to the stranger, she asked him if he studied here. Ethan nodded and asked what was wrong. The next moment, she pulled out her student ID card with her rank, saying that if she was not mistaken, this was the custom in this school to greet people. Ethan was surprised to learn that this girl already had the rank of corporal. Alicia asked what our hero's rank was, but he was slow to answer. Noticing this, she demanded his name and rank in a commanding voice. Ethan immediately reported that he had been awarded the rank of Rookie of the 3rd Squad of the 10th Platoon. Only then did he realize that he had answered her without thinking because they had been forced to memorize it many times. Looking at Ethan, Alicia was surprised that he was just a newbie. After she extended her hand, saying that she was glad to meet him, the hero returned her handshake and asked what she was doing there. Alicia replied that she would be joining the ranks of the 10th Platoon starting tomorrow. After receiving her answer, Ethan smiled, saying that he hoped they would get along in the future, and then headed towards the exit. He said that he still had some things to do, so he had to go. Before Ethan could open the classroom door, Alicia grabbed his backpack and pulled him back, after which she pushed him against the wall. Ethan watched in surprise as the girl approached him and blocked his escape route. The hero said that he really needed to go. Looking into his eyes, Alicia said that he should show her around the school first. Ethan had no idea what to do in this situation, especially since Antonio could come here at any moment, and then he would not be able to escape. The hero made another attempt, saying that he was in a hurry and that she should look for someone else, but the girl stood her ground, replying that Ethan suited her just fine. He realized that today was an extremely unlucky day, and he would not be able to get away from either Alicia or Antonio. Getting a little closer to Ethan, the girl said that he should show her the school immediately. Sighing, the hero asked where she needed to go. Alicia asked him to take her to Sergeant Antonio. The hero could not help but be pleased with such a fortunate coincidence of circumstances. He hoped that since he would be busy because of Alicia, Ethan could be allowed to go home. He replied that he was just heading to Antonio's, at which moment the object of their discussion appeared outside the door, clearly in a bad mood. The unit leader opened the door, causing Ethan to become startled by his sudden appearance. When he asked if our hero had thought about skipping today's training, Ethan replied that he was just on his way to it. Alicia turned to the guy who came in, asking if he was Sergeant Antonio. He replied that she should communicate more respectfully with her elders, and the girl said that here, rank distribution is more important than age. Coming close to him, she asked if his rank was higher than hers. Without waiting for his answer, Alicia pulled away from Antonio, saying that they were on about the same level. Loosening his tie, he asked if she wanted to make sure. Ethan noticed their belligerent attitude and asked them not to start a fight right there. Suddenly, Alicia changed the subject, asking if Antonio had a girlfriend. The guy replied that there was no one there. Alicia smirked and said that it was pretty obvious, and that she also found guys like Antonio very annoying, and he replied that their feelings were mutual in that regard. Afterwards, she took a couple of steps back, saying that he should have come up with something for the sake of decency, whether it was a girl or a bride. When Antonio asked what Alicia was talking about, the girl replied that her family was quite conservative, so for his own safety, he had better listen to her advice. Ethan, standing to the side, had no idea what was going on or what the relationship was between the two. Having lost interest in Antonio, the girl switched to our hero, asking if he wanted to date her. Ethan was surprised by such a sudden question from the girl. He asked why him. She answered that they were the same height, and she liked it when the interlocutor's gaze was at the same level as hers. Confused, Ethan responded that it was too sudden and he needed to think about it, causing Alicia to be surprised by his reaction. For a while, she just stood there looking at the guy. Afterwards, the girl smiled, saying that although he was embarrassed, he looked quite cute. Approaching him, she asked what rank his ability was. Ethan hesitated and replied that it was F rank. Alicia pulled away from him, saying he was lying. The hero replied that he was telling the truth. Taking a step forward, the girl declared that such people simply do not exist. Antonio intervened in their argument and reminded them that it was time for Ethan to go to training. He asked the girl to leave so that he could take his ward. Sometime later, our hero completed his last set of pull-ups. Seeing that Ethan's body was already shaking slightly, Antonio said that he was staying only one last time. As the hero sank to the floor in front of Alicia, the girl admitted that she thought their training was just an excuse, but to her surprise, the guys had actually been exercising the whole time. Turning to the girl, Ethan asked her for help. Since she had decided to follow them, the girl replied that she did not see the need for it. The hero was amazed that only recently she demanded to be shown the school, and now instead she was watching their training. Pointing at Ethan, she asked why Antonio was training with him. He replied that the guy was an ordinary newbie, whom he decided to help because for him, physical indicators were more important than rank, and he had also been looking for a suitable partner for a long time. The girl smiled, guessing that the real reason was not so simple. Approaching Antonio, she said that she did not understand why she would waste her time on him unless he saw some potential in Ethan. The guy tensed up after her words. Alicia asked him to tell her what Ethan was hiding. After what she saw in this training, the girl was sure that Ethan's abilities were much higher than just F rank. Antonio replied that he did not know anything. Alicia realized that it would be difficult to get any information out of him. Then she decided that it would be best to ask Ethan himself about it. Lying on the floor, the hero replied that the girl was very much mistaken about him. He was just a useless F-rank rookie. From his answer, it was too obvious to Alicia and Antonio that it was a lie, but there was nothing they could do about it. Sighing, the unit leader grabbed the hero by the shirt, saying that there was plenty of time to rest and they needed to continue training. The next day, Mr. Reed announced that there was a new student in their class. Looking towards the door, he told the girl that she could come in. A few seconds later, Alicia stood in front of the entire class, smiling. Everyone looked at her with interest, because it was the first time someone had been transferred to them. Alicia turned to the teacher, asking where her place was. The man replied that she was sitting in the horse with the first squad, but first she needed to introduce herself. Having determined where Ethan was sitting, the girl replied that she liked the third squad and headed in his direction, ignoring the teacher's objections. As she walked past the rows, Alicia asked to be placed in the third squad. Ethan and his deskmate watched the new girl with bewilderment. Pointing to Ethan's neighbor, Alicia said she wanted to sit there and asked to switch seats. The guy replied that this was his place and he had no intention of giving it up. The girl didn't like his answer. Slapping her hand on the desk and leaning towards the guy, she asked if he really didn't want to move, adding threatening notes to her voice. He had no choice but to give up his seat to her. When the girl took her new place, one of the boys called out to her. Glenn asked with displeasure who she thought she was to allow herself to do such a thing. She smiled and asked if his rank was higher than hers, then said that she knew that the highest rank among the students was corporal, and that she was a corporal. Glenn stated that he was the leader of the squad, but the girl no longer listened to him, telling the teacher that she would sit here. Mr. Reed approved of this new girl's self-will. Alicia turned her attention to Ethan, noticing how he sighed in resignation, covering his face with his hands. The girl asked if he really didn't like her that much that he looked so unhappy. Placing her hand on his shoulder, she said that she had sat down next to him in the hopes of establishing communication with each other, but now she didn't know what to do. Ethan replied that he would like to be friends with her and it wasn't that he didn't like her. The teacher didn't let him finish speaking and asked Alicia to introduce herself to the class and tell about herself. The girl inhaled, saying that she had already sat down. A moment later, she stood up, saying that she would introduce herself from here. Glenn turned around, telling her that she needed to stand up in front of the entire class, as it was just common courtesy. Alicia replied that she could be heard well from here, and then smiled sweetly, saying that she was very pleased to meet everyone. The other students couldn't help but notice her overly impudent behavior. When she said that her rank was corporal and her manifested ability was White Jade Goblin, everyone was very surprised. Alicia ended her story by saying that she hopes for productive study together. Mr. Reed and many of the students kept staring at the girl in surprise until the very end. Ethan also looked at the girl. He didn't expect someone like her to be interested in him. He knew that the White Jade Goblin was the only inherited ability. Usually, abilities are not passed on by inheritance because the engraving of the soul, the essence of which is manifested in abilities, cannot be the same. One day, there appeared people who believed that they could pass on their ability to others. They wanted to make her stronger, more precise, and more dangerous, like a sharp blade. One of the families succeeded after some time. It was the Kim family, whose members were descendants of the king of the Shang dynasty. They had to leave their families and devote themselves to education and fighting. To protect their lineage, they practiced internal marriages. All the children born in this family had skin as pale as marble. Thus, this family managed to obtain the inherited ability that allows them to summon a White Jade Goblin. But over time, it became clear that only the daughters of this family could summon the goblin. After several centuries, the family's numbers had greatly decreased, and the clan was on the verge of extinction. In the last generation, a child was born who could summon a sword-wielding goblin. The girl adopted all the abilities and hidden skills of her family. At the moment, Alicia was the only one who had the highest level of swordsmanship. She was special from birth and was a true genius. Having finished telling her story, the girl asked if she could sit down. Mr. Reed, still in shock, replied that she could take her seat, after which he announced that from today on, Alicia is the deputy leader of the third squad. An unhappy Glenn jumped up from his seat, asking how some new girl could suddenly become his deputy. The teacher slapped the teacher's desk and said that no objections would be accepted. Glenn knew his place as leader was under threat, and he didn't like it very much. Meanwhile, Ethan said that Alicia turns out to be quite famous. The girl, in turn, replied that she was simply pretty, that's all. Looking into his eyes, she said that it wasn't just her who was special here, but he too, because it wasn't often that you met someone with an F rank. Ethan had never heard anyone of his rank referred to as special before. He sighed and asked Alicia to stop looking for things in him that weren't there. Laughing, the girl replied that she would definitely reveal all his secrets. Glenn couldn't think of anything else except the threat that had appeared in the form of the new student. He was determined to show this impudent girl his place at all costs. After the lesson ended, the big break began, during which everyone rushed to the cafeteria. Some have discussed how Alicia would be a much better leader of the third squad than Glenn, who is inferior to her in many ways. Sean remembered that on the day of the battles between the squads, Glenn gave strange orders, hiding behind others' backs the whole time. Passing by Glenn, Sean's interlocutor admitted that at first she thought of Alicia as a simple, arrogant girl, but after watching the video of her fights, she realized that she was excellent at giving orders. Elena still can't forget how cool Alicia was in that battle on video. The girl had no doubt that Alicia would soon displace Glenn from his position. Listening to all this, the anger inside their current leader boiled up even more. He realized that if he didn't do something about the new girl immediately, she would take his place without delay. Alicia herself was in the classroom with Ethan. Rising from her seat, she invited him to have lunch together. Our hero declined her offer, saying that he still had cleaning to do. Grabbing him by the vest, the girl said that she had no one to eat with, to which Ethan responded by saying that at the moment she was the most popular student in school. After letting him go, Alicia replied that she hated those who communicated with her only because of her merits. Ethan apologized in front, saying that he wouldn't be able to join her for lunch because he was really busy. When he listed to her all the things he had to do in exchange, Alicia said that it was too much for one person, and even the leader of the squad could not do it all alone. Ethan looked away and agreed that it was indeed difficult to do it alone. Leaning closer to him, Alicia asked if he was sometimes running errands for other leaders. Her gaze turned wild as she suggested that Ethan could carry out the tasks assigned to him by the entire class. Moving away from the girl, the hero replied that he helps everyone else from time to time. It seemed to him that if they start dividing up the responsibilities, then there will be complete confusion, and asked that Alicia not misunderstand this situation. The girl listened to her friend with surprise. When he finished his explanation, Alicia pursed her lips in irritation. The next moment, she grabbed Ethan by the vest again and dragged him along with her. When he asked where they were going, the girl replied that she needed to deal with those who were irresponsible in their duties, shifting them onto others. Entering the cafeteria, where all her classmates were, Alicia easily found Michael and approached him. He looked at her in surprise, asking what she wanted. The girl asked if he was the one appointed to be responsible for cleaning the office. If so, then why was he shifting his responsibilities onto the shoulders of someone else? Michael spread his arms wide and replied that it should go without saying, since Ethan was only an F rank who could only be assigned to tasks like this. Covering his mouth with her hand, Alicia said she wasn't interested in his pathetic excuses. Smiling, she said that everyone must mind their own business. Alicia considered bullying the weak to be a very low act. She said that she would not stoop to something like that and hoped that Michael understood perfectly well what she was getting at. After her words, the guy turned very pale. When the girl removed her hand, he apologized, saying that he would not behave like that again. Pointing at Ethan, Alicia said that Michael should apologize to him, not her. Having received the apologies due to our hero, they then went to the teacher. Alicia told him about the situation. The man said that he was not aware of what was happening with Ethan and appointed the girl responsible for distributing responsibilities. The girl was happy with the powers given to her and thanked Mr. Reed. Ethan himself did not share her joy, because she literally turned his entire usual way of life upside down. Meeting Sean in the hallway talking to Nicholas, Alicia said that she was now assigning responsibilities and handed one of them a mop, making him responsible for the floors and the other for washing the boards. The boys looked at the girl in bewilderment, asking why they had to do the frill. When Sean said that this was something an F rank should do, Alicia silenced him by hitting both of them in the throat with a mop. She said that shifting responsibilities onto one person does not add to their honor. At that moment, a disgruntled Glenn called out to her. Alicia turned her attention to him, asking if he wanted to help with the cleaning. The guy ignored her question, saying that she should call him leader. The girl nodded, then asked what he needed. He asked in bewilderment whether a leader should approach his subordinate only on business. The girl didn't respond to this, silently checking Glenn with her eyes. Afterwards, she shrugged, saying that it would have been better if she had become the leader of the squad instead of him. The guy was infuriated by her words. Turning around, she said that since the squad leader didn't need anything, she would go. Glenn stopped her, telling her to come to the roof of the school after school because they needed to discuss something regarding the squad. Ethan heard Alicia being called to the roof to hear her answer. He got up from his seat and sat by the door to avoid being noticed. When the lessons were over, the girl went to the roof. Our hero followed her, keeping his distance so as not to be noticed. Having reached the very top, the girl opened the door and walked out through it without the slightest hesitation. Ethan was in no hurry to climb higher, expecting that Alicia might change her mind and come back. He waited a minute, making sure that no one was going to come down from the roof. Only after that did he rise higher, thinking that Glenn had made a big mistake by challenging someone like Alicia. The hero stopped near the half-open door, listening attentively to the conversation. Alicia asked what exactly Glenn wanted to discuss with her, to which the guy replied that, when she came here, she should have realized everything herself. after which he pointed to a group of his people standing behind him. The girl grinned and said that their leader was no slouch and was quite popular at school. Several dozen students from different classes stood in front of Alicia. Glenn said that since she was a member of his squad, he did not intend to raise his hands in the future after today's conversation. Alicia wondered if her squad leader was so weak that he couldn't talk calmly without a crowd of his friends behind him. Her words made Glenn laugh. Trying to contain his laughter, he said it was time to teach his deputy a lesson. The surprised girl pointed to herself, asking again what exactly they were going to do. Then she looked at Glenn, asking what exactly he was going to teach her. The boy, flexing his wrists, replied in a more understandable language that he would make Alicia regret her behavior. The girl asked what was wrong with her behavior. Glenn replied that she should obey her leader's orders. His words made her laugh a lot. She asked why she should do that. Alicia said that Glenn would have to be either stronger than her or smarter for her to obey him. But the guy standing in front of her didn't fit any of these points, so she said that she didn't recognize him as a leader. Glenn couldn't believe that Alicia actually dared to say something like that. He commanded those standing behind him to activate their abilities. The girl watched her opponents assessing their strength. She replied that they had quite a few melee weapons, but they were completely ordinary without any additional enhancements. Glenn was sure that such a number of opponents must have shaken Alicia's confidence. He asked if she felt her abilities were insignificant looking at his team. The girl replied that this should apply more to them than to her. Glenn told her to stop talking nonsense because his people would have no trouble dealing with her in a matter of minutes. He reminded her that using abilities in school was forbidden, especially one as strong as hers, so if she activated it, she would be severely punished. At that moment, several fighters stepped forward. He was confident because he selected only those who could use their abilities safely without fear of being noticed. He knew that in order to fully utilize her power, Alicia needed a sword, which the girl did not have. Comparing a professional without the ability to use his ability and losers with abilities, it was obvious to him that the latter would win. Glenn said that the girl had better give up from the start because she wouldn't be able to handle such a crowd. If she changed her mind about him, he promised that she would be treated a little more gently. Suddenly, Alicia asked if Glenn had any thoughts when he looked at Antonio, who was quite famous in this school. The guy didn't understand what she was trying to say. Alicia said that everyone knew the rank of her normal ability, then asked if they knew the rank of her combat ability. When she took a step forward, the guys who had stepped forward began to back away in fear. Glenn didn't understand what they were doing because a swordsman without his sword was no threat against a whole crowd with abilities. Alicia sighed and said that he should have tried harder during the squad battle. Then she pointed to her forehead, asking if he had forgotten what they had been taught. She reminded him that according to statistics, one A-rank fighter could easily defeat 100 lesser opponents, after which a single horn grew from her forehead and her hair began to lighten. Alicia said that the first thing a fighter must learn to get an A-rank is to go against the crowd alone. After her words, everyone froze in horror, realizing that such an opponent was beyond their capabilities. Noticing that everyone was starting to retreat hesitantly, Glenn shouted that it was stupid to be afraid of an enemy who didn't even have a weapon. Then he pointed at the girl, ordering everyone to attack her together. The guy holding the bat decided to trust Glenn's words. The next moment, he was the first to attack her, swinging the bat at Alicia. Contrary to his expectations, the girl simply stood there, not reacting in any way to his attack. Alicia watched the bat approach her face, wondering if this guy was overestimating himself. The next moment, the bat stopped a couple of centimeters away from her. The guy looked at her in surprise. The girl intercepted his hand, holding the bat at a distance. Afterwards, she threw the enemy aside and he flew into his comrades standing nearby. As a result, all three lay unconscious, having flown into the fence. After that, she attacked a guy standing nearby. Alicia dealt with a large number of opponents in a matter of seconds without much effort. One of the guys she had defeated tried to get up from the ground, thinking that this girl was invincible even without a sword. He admitted that against her, who was an A-rank, they were nothing. Sitting down next to him, Alicia said that he gave up too quickly, so he would never reach her level. Her words seemed like a mockery to the guy. Raising his head, he said that being special from birth, she would not understand ordinary people and the efforts they make to achieve something. Alicia listened calmly to the guy, waiting for him to finish. He was firmly convinced that a person who was born with the strongest ability would never be able to understand how difficult it is for others to achieve something. When the boy fell silent, the girl rose from her knees, saying that he could continue to think like that, but her original combat abilities were D rank. It was clear from his face that he didn't believe her words. Glenn shouted out that there was no way she could be a D rank. There wasn't a single person in the entire country who hadn't heard of her family and what gifted children they produced. He said that for her manipulations, Alicia should have come up with something better. No one would believe that someone like her doesn't have talent. Shrugging her shoulders, the girl agreed that having a D-rank combat ability, while the main ability passed down from generation to generation was of A rank, was a manifestation of true lack of talent. Afterwards, she said that despite her desire to use the sword, she would have to restrain herself to avoid disciplinary action. By this time, many had already managed to come to their senses and rise from the floor, looking at her with fear. Alicia realized that there was no point in trying to prove anything to them with words because they would never acknowledge the enormous amount of effort she had put in to become who she was now. Looking at her palm, covered with many calluses, she said that she would show them all her efforts in practice. Glenn decided to attack her first, rushing at her at the same time as everyone else. However, less than a minute had passed before all the attackers lay helplessly on the floor. Alicia turned her attention to Glenn, who was keeping to the side. He didn't like that everything didn't go according to his plan, and the girl turned out to be much stronger than he expected. Alicia stretched her neck and said that it would all be over once she dealt with him. Glenn chuckled, saying that they could only resolve the situation between them by fighting one-on-one. Then he spread his arms out to the sides, telling the girl to attack him first. Alicia was alarmed by Glenn's careless confidence in himself. She assumed that he had hidden something under his sweater in advance. She complied with his request, moving towards him with lightning speed and telling him that he should relax his abdominal muscles. After which she directed her fist towards his stomach, intending to destroy what the guy had hidden there. Watching Alicia, Glenn was glad that she had fallen into his trap so easily. He knew that the girl was deliberately avoiding punches to the face because she would be punished if everything was found out. That's why he took a step back and ducked, intending to take that blow in the face. Alicia tried to understand the reason why her opponent was smiling in such a situation. At some point, Glenn leaned even lower, exposing himself to the girl's fist. He was confident that if he pretended to have been beaten by Alicia, he would not be punished. When the girl's fist was a few centimeters away from him, suddenly someone intercepted the blow, not allowing Alicia's fist to touch Glenn. Ethan was glad that he made it on time because if he had been even a second late, something irreparable would have happened. Glenn was surprised that an F rank decided to interfere in their fight. Ethan stood up, throwing away the pieces of plastic that had taken the brunt of the impact, ignoring the surprised boy's questions about what he was doing there. The hero stepped on Glenn's hand, silencing him, after which he apologized for such a gross mistake in relation to his leader and asked if he was seriously hurt. Holding his sore arm, Glenn looked at Alicia, asking if she was the one who called this worthless thing here. Pointing at our hero, the girl replied that he had followed her himself. The note of discontent in her voice touched Ethan to the depths of his soul. He said that this life was too cruel to him because he was not welcome anywhere. A few moments later, Alicia's ability wore off. Looking at the distance from where they were to the front door, she couldn't understand how Ethan had managed to cover that distance in such a short time. To make it in time, he would need at least 10 seconds. Somehow he managed to get to them before her fist hit Glenn's face. He was also able to completely absorb her blow without being harmed. The girl clenched her fist, realizing that this guy might be stronger than she initially thought. Feeling something digging into her palm, she opened her fist and was surprised to find pieces of plastic there. Our hero pointed to the sky, saying that the sun was already setting and suggested that everyone go home, forgetting about what had happened here. Glenn stood up and asked who Ethan thought he was to dare to make decisions for others. He said that our hero and Alicia would be in big trouble if he complained to the teacher. Making the most innocent face Ethan could muster, he asked in surprise what he had done. He had only protected his fellow soldier, for which he should be praised. Alicia agreed with him, saying that their junior had indeed protected Glenn's face, so there would not be enough evidence to accuse them of anything. The guy laughed at her words, saying that she shouldn't be so self-confident. Pointing towards the door where he had hidden the camera earlier, Glenn said that everything that happened was recorded. The boy admitted that he was going to show this video to the teacher, proving that Alicia and Ethan, being in collusion, not only violated school rules, but also brutally beat other students. When the guy finished his enthusiastic speech, the hero pointed down, asking if this was the camera he was talking about. Glenn looked down in bewilderment and saw the wreckage of his camera, which would be very difficult to restore in such a state. Ethan apologized to the leader, saying that he didn't know it was a camera, and he mistook it for a regular piece of decor. Awkwardly scratching the back of his head, the hero said that it was the first thing that came to hand, that he could find here to soften the blow. Kicking one of the camera fragments, Olivia said that Glenn's plans were not destined to come true, but there was something that worried her more at the moment. Grabbing Ethan by the vest, she asked how he managed to stop her blow. Raising his hands in a gesture of surrender, the hero asked why she was treating him like this, since he had just helped her. The students who had come to their senses watched what was happening in surprise. One of them said that A-rank fighters not only have good skills, but also good luck. Alicia heard these words spoken and froze for a couple of seconds. Then she headed in their direction, dragging Ethan along with her. The boys watched the girl, wondering what she was going to do. She suddenly told them to stop whining about their low rank and advised them to learn a lot from Ethan. Alicia said that they should seriously consider her words and what had happened today, and then turned towards the door. Everyone just watched in surprise as the girl walked away, dragging our hero along with her. Glenn didn't move from his spot even as the door slammed shut, leaving him and his defeated team on the roof. He lowered his head, clenching his fists. Glenn really lost today. That same night, Ethan had a dream about events that happened many years ago. In an apartment covered in blood, a woman with severed limbs screamed and tried to crawl away from a little boy with a knife, calling him a monster. Blood covered the boy's entire body, which was covered with countless bruises from the beatings, which gave him a frightening appearance. Standing in front of the man's corpse, the boy said that he was no different from his uncle and aunt, who raised him like that. At this point, Ethan woke up, jumping up in bed. The next moment, the alarm clock set for 6 in the morning rang. But the hero did not pay attention to this annoying ringing, being overwhelmed by memories from the past that haunt him in nightmares. He breathed out heavily for a few moments. Coming back to reality, he had stopped seeing this dream since entering high school, but recent events made his nightmare return. A few hours later, walking next to Ethan, Alicia noticed that something was wrong with him today. She asked him if something had happened. Smiling, Ethan replied in his usual manner that he was just a little tired, then changed the subject, asking where they were heading anyway. Looking at Michael's group walking next to them, the girl replied that she didn't know because the teacher had only given the detailed information to the sergeants, but most likely they would have a joint lesson with the medical class. A few minutes later, they stopped near a tall building, after which Glenn said that they were there. Alien voices were immediately heard from the side. Students from another school had been waiting for them for a long time and openly mocked our hero's class because they had not shown their best side by being late on such an important day. An irritated Glenn approached them, asking who they were. The girl in front ignored his question and said that they were just interested in taking a look at Alicia, who was rumored to be unusually beautiful and talented. Glenn said irritably that Alicia was the deputy in his squad and if they had something to say, they could say it to him. After his words, the students from the other school laughed, saying that their attempts to appear military looked stupidly funny. Glenn couldn't listen to this any longer, so he said that he was the sergeant of the 3rd Squad of the 10th Platoon of the Special Training High School, and then demanded that they tell him who they were. One of the girls asked him who they looked like in his opinion. He responded irritably that they were the scum of the earth. A man suddenly appeared and put his hand on the shoulder of one of the girls, saying that they should not quarrel with other schools. Lewis apologized for his classmates' behavior, saying they had been a little overexcited. After which he extended his hand to Glenn, saying that he was very pleased to meet him. Glenn pushed away the hand that was extended to him, replying that Lewis should not waste his time and explain what was going on here. The guy suggested that Glenn calm down first so that they could have a normal dialogue. Alicia came out in front and said that he really should calm down and watch what he says because their training rating had dropped a lot lately and they needed to restore it. Afterwards, the girl turned her attention to Lewis and asked for forgiveness for Glenn's behavior. Lewis replied that everything was fine and then said that he was very glad to meet her. Alicia ignored his outstretched hand in greeting, saying that their squad had come for a joint lesson with the medical class. After which she asked what the students from another school were doing here. Lewis smiled and replied that they were the class that was supposed to be working with them today. The guy also said that they had been waiting for this day to come for a long time. Afterwards, the students from the 2 schools headed to the bank building, where their assignment would most likely take place. Lewis said both schools are committed to the bank and felt it would be a great place for their practice. Noting the absence of people on this street and the presence of a security guard at the entrance, the guy assumed that the bank was closed for today on the occasion of their arrival. When they went inside, a man met them there saying that they had come on time. Some of the students had heard that they would be assigned security personnel, so they were not very surprised by the appearance of men in uniform. She took a few steps forward and introduced herself, saying that she had been looking forward to this day. The men laughed and replied that she was brave beyond her years. Alicia asked what they were going to do today. After her question, Jack, who met them, laughed even more, saying that he was starting to like her, and he would be happy to take her into his unit when she grew up. Sometime later, they were taken inside the bank. As Alicia took off her sword, she thought that their fighting abilities were completely ignored, and they were treated like little children, and she would have to try hard to prove her worth. Suddenly, she called out to Lewis, who was standing next to her. He immediately approached her, asking what business she had with him. Alicia asked him to split his class into 4 temporary squads because they needed to present themselves in a good light to the bank. Then I looked at my classmates who were busy communicating with the staff. Sighing, the girl said that they were acting too carelessly and no one was taking the whole situation seriously. A passing employee said that he and some other guys were going to get coffee and asked if they would like something to drink. When Alicia heard that there was a coffee machine in the cafeteria and that other drinks could also be purchased, all her seriousness disappeared. Leaving her sword behind, she ran after the man, figuring that it wouldn't hurt to relax a little, and besides, there were people from the security department here. Ethan, however, decided not to join the others in the cafeteria. Staying in his room, he thought everyone was too relaxed. Suddenly, Lewis approached him. The hero did not expect such an unexpected appearance of the guy, so he could not hide his surprise, wondering what he needed. Smiling, Lewis asked if Ethan was close to Alicia. The hero assumed that Lewis wanted him to arrange a date with Alicia and assured him that he would do a great job of it. The guy waved his hand, saying that he hadn't approached Ethan for that. The hero turned out his empty pockets, saying that if Lewis wanted to ask him to buy something, he didn't have any money on him. Lewis said that this assumption was also incorrect. The next moment, he said that he was interested in Ethan himself. Afterwards, he asked him if he wanted something to drink. Pointing behind him, Lewis said he saw a vending machine nearby. Ethan agreed to his proposal and headed in the indicated direction. He paused for a second, wondering if he should warn Glenn, but deciding that everything would be fine without him, he moved on. A few minutes later, he was enjoying a cool cola. Watching Ethan, Lewis said he thought he was too carefree. When asked if Ethan was hiding his abilities from the entire school, the hero almost choked on his drink. Even though he replied that this was not the case, Lewis could not shake the strange feeling that Ethan did not fit into the class group at all and seemed superfluous. Smiling, the hero replied that being carefree is his motto in life. Lewis asked what rank his ability was. Ethan replied that he had an F rank. Surprised, Lewis asked if he was deceiving him, and the hero replied that he really was. Not fully believing Ethan's words, the guy asked if he was testing him, to which the hero replied that he had no need to do that. Afterwards, Ethan took a step back and threw the empty can into the trash can, which was standing a few meters away from him. Lewis was surprised when the can went straight into the trash. He looked at Ethan with enthusiasm, saying that it was cool, and then asked how he did it. The hero did not understand what in this action struck Lewis so much, and replied that he simply threw the can. After his words, the guy was eager to do the same. After making sure there was no drink left in the can, Lewis got into a throwing stance and threw the can into the trash. However, he was unable to do the same as Ethan because his can flew over the trash can, crashed into the wall, and then fell to the floor. Lewis ran for the can, saying it wasn't as easy as it looked, to which Ethan replied that the guy just had bad reflexes. After throwing away the can, Lewis said that he wasn't very good at fighting, so he transferred to the first aid section and then asked how Ethan, with such a weak rank, managed to stay in the combat class. The hero replied that Alicia and his innate luck were helping him. Afterwards, Ethan approached Lewis, asking what his ability was. The next moment, the guy's right hand transformed into a blade. Looking at this, Ethan said that this was a pretty good ability with a lot of potential. Lewis transformed his hand back, saying that he hears it often, but the problem is that it hasn't changed at all in all this time. The hero guessed what thoughts were going through Lewis's head and assumed that he was interested in Ethan's rank because he was thinking about transferring to the combat class. The guy smiled awkwardly, replying that it was indeed so. Ethan had absolutely no idea about the man standing in front of him. He said he felt that providing medical care was much better because it would allow him to save the people he cared about. Rubbing his neck, Lewis admitted that he hadn't thought about it that way, and that perhaps he really did need to rethink his approach. Listening to him, Ethan bit his lip painfully, trying to suppress his emotions. A few moments later, he put on his usual smile and, placing a hand on Lewis's shoulder, encouraged him, telling him that he needed to be more confident and take things easier. Deep down, Ethan was terribly jealous of him and thought that it would be much better if he too could use his ability to save people instead of killing. Afterwards, the hero turned around, saying that they had lingered here too long and that they should hurry back. At the same time, Mr. Reed met with the organizers of the task for his students near the bank building. One of the men pulled out grading forms with a list of students from an envelope, offering to begin assigning grades. The teacher looked at Pavel in surprise, saying that the main task had not even begun yet, to which the man replied that improvisation saves in such situations. He advised Reed to first evaluate his best students by imagining what grade they could get, since this was a typical theory reinforcement assignment. The teacher liked the proposed approach and agreed. He quickly ranked the students based on their rank, The only one that Teacher Reed gave the lowest grade to was Ethan. After he handed the documents back to Pavel, he suggested going out for a coffee. He had just recently heard about a new coffee shop nearby. After returning from the cafeteria, 2 people were posted at the entrance as security, which was very tiring if you had to stand around doing nothing for a long time. Sometime later, Sean suggested to a girl standing next to him that they play rock, paper, scissors, and whoever loses gets to buy drinks. Lisa agreed and they began the game, not noticing that men dressed in military gear were approaching the entrance of the building. At that moment, Michael approached them with an open package of chips, saying that someone was coming here. A few moments later, a group of unfamiliar men stopped at the front door of the building. Hearing the students talking about the appearance of some strange people, Jake stopped with a mug of hot coffee in his hand and looked towards the entrance. The next moment, he threw down his unfinished coffee and, cursing, ran there. As he approached the students, the man shouted for them to step aside immediately. But they stood still, not understanding what was happening. Jack moved behind them in a flash and pushed them aside, after which he created a tonfa blocking the enemy's attack. With difficulty holding back the onslaught of the attacker, John shouted to all the students present to run to the emergency exit. The students themselves did not understand what was happening and were dumbfounded with fear, ignoring John's order. Noticing that everyone remained standing in their places, the man asked what they were doing because they had been ordered to run away from here as quickly as possible. At that very moment, his weapon began to become covered with deep cracks, unable to withstand the enemy's force. A few moments later, everyone saw John being cut in 2 by an enemy unknown to them. Throwing the blood-stained sword over his shoulder, Douglas said that he was glad to meet his comrades from South Korea. A terrifying aura emanated from this man, and the scar on half of his face made him even more dangerous. A few moments later, 2 more guards came running here, and one of them asked Douglas who he was and what he wanted here. The man ignored the question, telling the guard that he looked pretty tough and that maybe he could at least cheer Douglas up a little. Paul's partner said that the stranger's accent sounded like North Korean, and based on these words, Paul asked the attackers if they were spies sent from the north. Douglas replied that today they were not playing the role of spies, but of beggars. After this, he threw a large bag on the floor, saying that if they did not want to lose their heads, they had better hurry and fill this bag with money. Paul was at a loss. He could not fulfill this request, but he was in no hurry to part with life. A few moments later, reinforcements arrived. Realizing that his polite request was not going to be fulfilled, Douglas said that they had better fill the bag with money while he asked them nicely. Paul shouted at the man to stop demanding the impossible and get as far away from there as possible. Raising his huge sword, Douglas said that to this day he wondered whether the people of the southern part suffered from hearing or sight, since they dared to challenge him every time. Alicia was behind the guards all this time. Looking at Douglas, she realized that he had a fairly high rank, and they had absolutely nothing to counter such a monster. Paul created a wall of steel to shield himself from Douglas, allowing his colleagues to get closer to the enemy and protect the school children who had become unwitting hostages of the situation. Alicia realized how reckless the man's actions were and ran forward, shouting that he needed to get out of there. But she was too late. At that very moment, the wall built by Paul was destroyed in one blow. Alicia watched in horror as the guard's bloody body collapsed to the floor. Standing next to him, Matt recoiled, realizing that the man who could have provided them with some measure of safety had been killed in a split second. The girl couldn't believe that Douglas had dealt with an A-rank fighter so easily. She came to the conclusion that this man's rank was no lower than A rank, if not S. Douglas looked with disdain at the corpses lying nearby, saying that all attempts to maintain order were completely pointless. Afterwards, he brushed the blood off his sword. Alicia got the attention of the other students by shouting for everyone to obey her orders. She ordered everyone to run behind the bankers' desks. Sean nodded his head, starting to rise from the floor. Watching the students run to the bankers' workstations, Douglas, standing at the ticket dispenser, asked if, since they had decided to become bank employees, he needed to take a ticket to get money. Once on the other side of the room, Alicia told everyone to activate their abilities, and from now on, the sergeants are in charge of their squads. Having never received an answer to his question, Douglas kept pressing the ticket button, saying that he would like to get some money. The sound emitted by this device was very harsh on the ears of our heroes. Jumping onto one of the tables, Alicia said that everyone needed to get together and hold out until the police or teachers came to help. Moving his bag a little closer, Douglas asked that the students not be so inhospitable to their new friend, because they should support each other. Taking a look at the men, Alicia was sure that in terms of strength, they were in no way inferior to Douglas. Meanwhile, the man continued his monologue, saying that their wallets were empty, so they wanted to ask the bank for help, but they encountered an inhospitable attitude towards them which greatly depresses him. Standing opposite Alicia, he asked the name of such a brave girl. When she told him her name, Douglas asked why she had remained silent all this time, ignoring his concerns. Alicia decided that she not only needed to try to buy as much time as possible, but also to try to get some useful information out of him, so she said that the man did not look like a spy, they would not rob a bank, and she suggested that they had escaped from North Korea. Douglas was amused by the girl's words and couldn't help but smile. Without removing the smile from his face, he said that he had better introduce himself. Alicia was surprised that the criminal decided to reveal his identity on his own. The next moment, the man said that they were members of the Plague. The girl had heard about this group before. She remembered that the location of their base was never revealed, and the members of this terrorist group were against all of humanity. Wherever their footsteps, not even insects survive. The only trace that the members of the Plague left behind were piles of dead bodies and pools of blood. The others knew about this group as well as Alicia, which is why fear began to take hold of each of the students. Kicking the bag with his foot, Douglas said that since everyone understood everything, they should start filling his bag with money. One of the girls offered to fulfill his request and simply give him the money. At that moment, Alicia stepped forward, activating her ability. Douglas looked at the girl with some admiration. Alicia, on the other hand, was completely serious and planned to engage in battle with him if necessary. She told her classmates that they should calm down and pull themselves together. Alicia also said that no one said that they would be left alive after Douglas took his money. Looking at the appearance of the girl standing in front of him, he remembered that he had heard about this ability before, but he was able to see its carrier in real life for the first time in his life. From his face, Alicia realized that he already knew about her family and offered the man a fight. She decided to use the chance given to her and convince Duke to fight one-on-one. The man smirked, guessing the girl's plans. He said that she was quite smart, but he would not fall for such a pathetic trick. Spreading her arms out to the sides, Alicia asked if Douglas would go after one student with a whole crowd. The man laughed, then admitted that he liked her bravery, and then accepted the girl's offer, gesturing for his men to step back. When he asked if Alicia was as crazy as her predecessors, the girl replied that there was too much talk, and then asked if they would fight or just gossip. Gripping his sword more comfortably, Douglas said that her provocation was very sweet, and he would gladly give in to it. Pointing his sword at Alicia, the man told her to attack. Without showing her excitement, the girl replied that it was very presumptuous of him to give her such an honor. Looking at Douglas's subordinates standing a little further away, Alicia was sure that he would not break his promise to them, so if she could stay alive, if she could immobilize the man. The girl reached for her sword, but it was not there. Looking behind her and making sure that there was no weapon, the girl felt horror, because without her sword she would not be able to resist Douglas. The next moment she remembered that she had left it during the break. When the man attacked her, she managed to lean back, dodging the attack. The wall behind it was destroyed by one blow of Douglas's sword. Alicia managed to hide for a few moments behind this debris. She understood that if it weren't for her reaction speed, she could have been in the place of this pile of stones. Alicia decided to use the wall debris as her weapon and then jumped on one of the debris that was falling near Douglas, hoping to pin him to the floor. The man noticed her and turned around, cutting the fragment into small pieces, wondering where Alicia's former courage had gone since she had decided to attack from behind. Cursing, the girl landed opposite her opponent. The man pointed his sword at her again, asking if she was sure she was indeed a goblin and not a flying squirrel. Alicia managed to successfully dodge all of his subsequent attacks. The other students watching their fight were amazed that Alicia was able to withstand such a strong opponent. They started supporting the girl, shouting her name and that she would succeed. Ethan was currently analyzing the current situation, thinking about how best to proceed. Lewis, who was sitting next to her, said with delight that Alicia was simply incredible for being able to withstand the onslaught of a monster like Douglas. Ethan put his hand on the guy's shoulder, saying that now was not the time for this. Hearing that they had to run, Lewis asked, confused, where to run. Looking at the ceiling, the hero replied that it would be best for them to run upstairs, to the restroom, to the offices. They needed to hide where they could not be found quickly. Ethan was well aware that Alicia wouldn't last long, so he decided it would be better to try to hide the students. A few moments later, Douglas caught the girl, changed the trajectory of his sword strike, and struck her. This caused Alicia to fly to the side, hitting the wall hard. The man began to slowly approach her, dragging his huge sword across the floor. He said with a smile that it was time for them to stop playing cat and mouse. When Alicia coughed up blood, the mood of the students watching her changed. They were horrified because their strongest student had lost. Pointing the blade of his sword at her, Duke asked if this was all Alicia was capable of, and the girl replied that if he was so interested, he should check it out for himself. After her words, the man smiled bloodthirstily. At that moment, Ethan shouted for everyone to run towards the stairs. Douglas was about to finish off Alicia, raising his sword over her head, but our hero's scream made the man freeze in surprise. Immediately after this, Ethan grabbed Lewis by the collar of his jacket and dragged him along with him. Everyone else ran after him. Michael was running in the line, one of the first. He was overcome with fear no less than the others. Looking back, he shouted to those lagging behind that they should not get caught if they wanted to live on, so everyone should hurry. At the same time, Douglas scratched the back of his head, saying that the kids were smart. The subordinates who approached asked him if there would be an order regarding this matter, the man replied, giving the order to catch all the children. His subordinates saluted, replying that this order would be carried out. After that, they went up the stairs and split into groups, several people per floor. Alicia assumed that since Douglas had only given the order to catch everyone, he was not going to kill them. The girl decided to drag out the time as long as she could, once again standing in front of her opponent. Smiling, Douglas said he appreciated her tenacity. He asked if she wanted to join him. Alicia replied that she had no reason to switch sides. Smiling, the man advised her to think carefully about his offer because girls were lining up to meet him. Alicia asked, confused, why she should trust some robber. Douglas realized that he had completely forgotten to introduce himself, after which he gave his full name, Douglas Taylor. Alicia knew the name very well. The man in front of her was not only an outstanding politician in North Korea, but also the best military commander. Douglas said he was excited about rising to the top at such a young age, so he needed a talented woman by his side. Alicia was at a loss. She could not come up with a single good reason to explain why such an influential person would come here in person. Noticing that the girl began to back away, Douglas sighed, sadly saying that it was for this very reason that he usually did not reveal his identity. A slight tremor began to run through the girl's body, trying not to betray her fear in her voice. She said that such a person must have a good fortune and a lot of money. Smiling, Alicia said that with his money she could treat all her friends to dinner at an expensive restaurant. Her words made Douglas laugh. He found the girl standing in front of him quite interesting. Looking at her, the man thought that meeting her was worth coming here, carrying out the order he received to rob a bank with students inside. Pointing to himself, Douglas said that the winner of their duel had long been decided, and she had better be a little more polite to him while he was kind. At this moment, Alicia had just reached the place where she had previously left her sword. Kicking her weapon into the air, the girl said that she almost died trying to get it. When the sword was in her hand, the girl said that in future she should take better care of her things. After that, he began to slowly pull the sword out of its sheath, releasing all his strength. Smiling, Alicia said that in order for Douglas to see what she was truly capable of, she would need a sword. At the same time, the students tried to escape from their pursuers. However, the military still managed to catch up with and capture the terrified students. They returned to the first floor, dragging the children they had found behind them. At the same time, Ethan and Lewis managed to successfully hide in one of the toilet stalls. He looked around and said with surprise that the banks were pretty good at keeping things clean. Lewis asked excitedly if they should go up even higher, since they were only on the 5th floor now while the others had gone up higher. Sitting down on the toilet, Ethan replied that he needed a little time to catch his breath. Looking at the hero, Lewis asked if everything was okay with him. Ethan looked at him in surprise, replying that he was fine. Lewis remembered what had happened to the guards on the 1st floor and was sure that if they were caught, the same fate would befall them. He looked away, deciding not to voice his concerns, and simply said that it was better for them not to stay here for long because they would be caught quickly. So Lewis took Ethan's hand, helping him stand up. Our hero thought that Alicia would be able to hold out for some time. His assumptions about what would happen when Douglas finally played enough were not rosy. Ethan pushed the guy's hand away, saying there was no point in running. He said they needed to fight, which puzzled Lewis. The guy tried to reason with the hero, saying that it was better for them not to catch the eye of the military, because even the teachers would not be able to do anything against these people, not to mention the C and F-ranked ones themselves. Suddenly, Ethan asked Lewis if it was possible to divide souls into ranks. Faced with a face full of incomprehension, the hero said that he once heard an interesting story. He said that Alicia's combat abilities were previously only D rank, but now they have risen to A rank. Ethan explained that one shouldn't focus on just ranks, which can be increased through hard training. At the same time, one of Douglas's subordinates went up to the 5th floor, finding no one on the lower floors. Lewis asked why Ethan brought this up so suddenly. Hearing approaching footsteps, the boy panicked, saying that they had already been discovered. The man intended to check every room on the floor, but due to the noise coming from the toilet, he would most likely limit himself to this room only. Lewis said that now was not the time to talk because they might be overheard. Ethan put his hand on his shoulder, asking him to listen. Coming closer, the hero said that now Lewis should trust him and do what he says. The next moment, the man came inside, telling the students to come out because their conversations could be heard clearly even from the corridor. But his words were ignored and no one was going to come out. Then the man said that his boss doesn't like slow people and they'd better hurry up if they don't want to make him angry. After his words, Ethan looked out from behind the opened booth, saying that the man had a very interesting accent and asked to teach him to speak like that. Thomas told the guy to stop fooling around. Douglas wouldn't mind if Ethan broke one of his arms or legs. Standing opposite the man, the hero noted that without the presence of his boss, the man seemed much more talkative. The next moment, he created a dagger, after which he directed it at Thomas, who was standing opposite him. The man chuckled and asked if his ability was really that insignificant. The next moment, using the acceleration, Thomas ran towards Ethan, telling him that he better give up. The hero turned to Lewis, telling him that he must escape at the first opportunity. As Thomas approached Ethan, he said that they had nowhere to run because they were both trapped. After his words, the hero stopped holding back, releasing all his power. Just like last time, all of Ethan's stats have been tripled. Thomas, who had previously been moving at high speed, became much slower, which allowed the hero to calculate the trajectory of the enemy's strike. Dodging his fist, Ethan said the man was too slow. Standing next to this guy, his body began to shake slightly. Thomas did not understand what was happening. The next moment, Ethan struck his opponent so quickly that he did not have time to react. During this, he laughed like a madman, saying that he was very sorry. Grabbing Ethan's hand, Thomas said the guy was just crazy. The hero only smiled, looking appraisingly at the man, after which he said that it was quite convenient to be able to accelerate to 100 meters per second. Thomas asked in bewilderment if Ethan was really able to see other people's abilities. The guy replied that anything was possible, after which, with a look full of madness, he asked whether he should cut off the man's ankles. He was curious about what would happen to a person if the means of manifestation of his soul essence was destroyed, after which he struck the man in the shoulder. The more blood there was on him, the more madness took hold of Ethan. The toy that ended up in his hands was too interesting, and he wanted to play with it to the fullest, experimenting with what would happen if he hit this or that point on Thomas's body. Lewis, still in the booth, watched what was happening in horror, not believing his eyes. A large tremor ran through his body, and he unconsciously began to retreat back, whispering Ethan's name. Hearing his name, the hero was distracted from his toy. Lewis froze as the hero looked at him with a look of madness. Ethan asked if Lewis had called him. Noticing the horror reflected on the guy's face, the hero asked what exactly he was so afraid of. Lewis forced himself to leave the booth, his voice shaking as he said that Ethan needed to run away as quickly as possible. The hero laughed at his words. He replied that Lewis was wrong here and asked who, in his opinion, really needed to leave here. He stood up slowly, holding Thomas's limp body, Ethan keeping his eyes on Lewis the entire time, waiting for his answer. The guy couldn't utter a word because of the fear that gripped him. For several long moments, Ethan stared at Lewis standing opposite him. Suddenly, the madness receded and our hero regained consciousness. At that very moment, a severe headache struck him. Ethan shook his head from side to side, trying to suppress his crazy side that was breaking through, causing his glasses to fall to the floor. The next moment, the guy again grabbed the still conscious Thomas by the collar of his jacket. With all his might, Ethan shouted at Lewis to get out of here as fast as he could. The boy winced when the hero said that the nature of his ability to turn his hands into a blade meant that Lewis's body could not be destroyed. Ethan advised him to think about it. Swallowing, Lewis did as Ethan asked and ran towards the exit. After this, the hero breathed a sigh of relief, saying that now he did not need to worry about witnesses. Thomas laughed and twirled his finger at his temple, saying that the guy had definitely gone crazy. Raising his eyes to the man, again full of madness, Ethan said that he would still have to carry out plan number 13. The man had absolutely no idea what this guy was talking about and was thinking that he absolutely had to report this psycho to his boss. However, his plans were not destined to come true because the next moment Ethan slit his throat. At the same time, Alicia felt much more confident when she finally had the sword in her hands. Douglas studied the girl's weapon with interest, saying that the sword matched her cute face. Placing the sword in front of her, Alicia replied that he would change his mind after the first blow. Getting into a fighting stance, Douglas asked if she was so sure she could defeat him. The next moment, he attacked the girl. Alicia blocked his strike with her sword. Douglas looked at her with eyes full of surprise. Smiling, the girl answered his question that her victory was already obvious. Alicia was becoming more and more interesting to him, and returning to his original position, Douglas asked if she really didn't recognize him as an ability. Looking at her sword, He had a hunch that it was somehow weakening his ability. Douglas said that Alicia had a strange sword. The girl replied that many people told her that she robbed her family by taking this sword. She said that it was created specifically for fighting strong opponents. Thanks to the constellations applied to the blade, the sword has the power of the stars, thanks to which the owner, having a high level of sword mastery, can destroy an A-rank opponent and above. Having finished her story, the girl attacked the man. The next moment, her doubles appeared on either side of Douglas. He laughed, saying that Alicia was quite an interesting opponent, and asked again if she would like to join him. The girl replied that her opinion had not changed at all since last time. Raising his sword above his head, Douglas said that it would be a shame to kill Alicia now, when he had not yet fully enjoyed their battle. Afterwards, he attacked the girl along with her doubles. Alicia managed to cover herself with her sword flying to the side. But her doubles, having fallen under Douglas's attack, began to disappear. The man didn't give Alicia time to catch her breath and immediately made another attack in her direction. The girl blocked his attack with her sword, but Douglas's attack was too strong. The next moment, the man applied even more force, causing the girl to fly to the side, after which he said that he was stronger than her. Gripping her sword tighter, Alicia said that he had too much self-importance and ran towards Douglas. As Alicia approached him, she created 2 more doubles. They all attacked the man at once, who didn't even move when she used the technique again. Douglas struck quickly and hard, disposing of Alicia's doubles. The girl hoped that her doubles would be able to distract the man, giving her a chance to attack when Douglas was open. But this plan failed. Her doubles disappeared too quickly, and Alicia found herself alone with her enemy again. Jumping back, Douglas said that he was beginning to like her more and more. Alicia was no longer so confident in herself. Her opponent turned out to be stronger than she expected. Douglas asked the girl if she still thought she was stronger than him. Without waiting for her answer, he said that what he had shown should have been enough to convince Alicia to join him. Standing in a stance, the girl replied that this was not enough for her. At that very moment, the military entered through the main entrance, dragging the escaped students behind them. Alicia was surprised that they had already managed to catch someone during this time. Noticing that they appeared from the street, the girl assumed that the entire police force had come here because of the noise, but they couldn't do anything because of the hostages. Douglas asked why his subordinates were only bringing children in from the street if they had previously gone up to the upper floors. One of the men said they split into 2 teams, one of which raided the upper floors while the other waited outside the building to catch the students jumping out of the windows. He also reported that those who still had not returned went up to the upper floors to look for those who remained. Alicia was very surprised when she heard that the men immediately went outside, and during all this time, the police did not make a single attempt to save the hostages. The current situation seemed too strange to her. Looking at Alicia, Douglas said that all her thoughts were written on her face. Throwing the sword over his shoulder, he said that all her guesses about why the police hadn't arrived yet would be wrong, because they had temporarily closed the bank using their abilities. When Douglas said that, it was like a bucket of cold water had been doused over her. Meanwhile, the man continued, explaining that he would not have carried out the attack without proper preparation, even though the bank looked the same from the outside as usual, but no one would guess what was really going on inside. Alicia found it hard to believe that there was no one from the outside who could help them. She had previously thought that it would be enough to just hold out until the police arrived. But now the situation has changed a lot. Even if she manages to escape to bring help here, by the time she returns, everyone else will already be killed. The girl clutched her sword. She realized that it was useless to drag out time further by fighting, but Alicia didn't know what else she could do in this situation. Looking at her, Douglas asked where her former warrior spirit had gone. One of the bank employees, who was captured along with the students, kept looking at the leader with apprehension. Suddenly, he stood up and used his ability to run forward. He managed to reach the nearest table with a telephone in a matter of seconds. Matt picked up the phone and pressed the emergency call button, after which he requested security, saying that their bank had been seized by terrorists. As he spoke, the man turned around looking at the invaders, who, for some reason unknown to him, did not try to stop him in any way. There was no answer to his messages from the receiver, and Matt asked excitedly if anyone could hear him. Silence answered him again, and then the man realized that for some reason the connection had been blocked. At that moment, Douglas came up and threw the bag on the table in front of Matt. He smirked and asked if Matt hadn't heard his conversation with a young lady a few minutes ago. The man fell to his knees in fear before Douglas, who in turn explained that among his subordinates there was one who specialized in isolation, which meant that neither the phones nor the emergency call button worked. After his words, Michael and Sean took out their phones and saw that there was indeed no connection. Matt asked why someone as important as Douglas would burst into a bank in broad daylight. Tilting his head to the side, he replied that a man should not belittle his position because all professions are equally important. Ignoring his words, Matt shouted that if the special forces found out about his location here, Douglas would be in trouble. Smiling, Douglas replied that the point was that no one would be able to find out anything because of the isolation, which he had already talked about twice. After this, the man's gaze became more bloodthirsty, and a terrifying aura began to emanate from him. Matt froze in horror, realizing that he was about to be killed. The next moment, the sharp blade of Douglas's sword was pointed at him. The man said it was time for Matt to learn an important lesson. Douglas then raised his sword over his head. At that moment, Alicia shouted at him to stop, calling him a monster. The man froze in surprise at her words. Turning to her, he asked if he had misheard and if she had really just called him a monster. Alicia suggested that they fight again to determine the true winner. She sincerely hoped that Douglas would agree and leave this man alone. However, contrary to her expectations, he replied that the girl had already suggested this to him earlier, after which he asked if she understood the meaning of the words she had said earlier. Raising his sword above his head, Douglas said that she did not have to answer. The next moment, he chopped off Matt's leg, causing him to scream in intense pain. Alicia took a step back, watching such a horrific scene. Ignoring Matt's pleas for mercy, Douglas raised his hand for another blow and said that if she had known what her words meant, she would never have called him that. The next moment, Matt's screams stopped and the floor and walls were stained with the man's blood. Alicia closed her eyes at the last moment, not wanting to witness such cruelty. A few moments later, Matt's severed head flew past the girl. She opened her eyes when she heard something fall, and holding back a scream, she took a few steps back. Douglas pointed his sword at her, saying that since she had decided to challenge him a second time, he would not be as polite to her as before, but would simply cut off her legs and arms, after which he would carry them with him in a bag. He said that he would do Alicia a great honor by giving her death at his hand. Suddenly, the door leading to the stairs opened, making a loud sound. Everyone in the room turned their gaze in that direction. The next moment, Lewis came out from there, raising his hands up. Douglas turned to him and asked who he was. One of the subordinates stepped forward, saying that he would immediately seize the stranger, but Douglas stopped him. Lewis felt very awkward having so many eyes studying him. He thought that Ethan had been wrong in his assumptions that it would be hell here when he warned him about the situation on the first floor. Looking at the students trembling in fear and the pools of blood on the floor, Lewis was sure that this situation was much worse than just hell. In the bathroom stall before Thomas came in, Ethan told Lewis to run to the first floor as soon as he activated his ability and tell everyone he was there. The guy asked in bewilderment how he could leave Ethan alone in such a dangerous situation. Smiling, the hero asked Lewis to just trust him. Now he was on the first floor, and all he had to do was reveal Ethan's location to fulfill his request. When Douglas asked the boy to introduce himself, he gave his name and said he was a 10th grader in medical school. After which he said that all the money was on the 5th floor. Smiling, Douglas asked if the safe was really located in such a strange place. Lewis explained that his friend had moved everything there a little earlier. The man was alarmed by the guy's words about this strange friend. Without turning around, he asked his subordinates why those who went upstairs to look for the students had not yet returned. Looking at the fighters standing behind him, Douglas asked menacingly why they were standing there doing nothing while a child was walking around the floors of the building. One of the subordinates sat down on one knee in front of his commander, bowing his head. He said that he would check everything himself and bring the child here. As Douglas approached him, lowering his sword near his leg, Joshua began to beg the man for a chance to right his wrong. Douglas placed his hand on his trembling subordinate and told him that he was lucky that his hands were already stained today, and then ordered that the last student be brought here, taking the money with him. Joshua immediately stood up and saluted, thanking his commander for the service he had rendered him. Turning around, Douglas looked at the rest of his subordinates, telling them that they would also go with Joshua, and warned that he would not be so merciful if another mistake was made. Then he turned his gaze to Lewis. The boy flinched when he met Douglas's gaze, which did not bode well. The man asked if he was going to go up with the others or if he should do it himself. Lewis sighed and replied that he would go up to the 5th floor accompanied by Douglas's men. Having received his answer, the man smiled, praising the guy for making the right choice. After which he approached the student sitting on the floor, saying that while his subordinates would be busy with his friend, he would also have a little fun here. The next moment, Douglas pointed at Alicia and asked if everyone could see her clearly. Without waiting for an answer, he said that he would spare the life of anyone who brought him her leg or arm. Douglas was curious to know what they would do next. After the man's words, the faces of Alicia's classmates turned whiter than canvas. Clenching her fists and hanging her head, Erica asked if they should really go against Alicia. Douglas smiled as he watched the seeds of doubt begin to form in the students' minds. Sitting nearby, Catherine asked how Erica dared to think something like that when Alicia had fought for them from the very beginning, risking her life. Erica looked at Douglas and replied that the situation had changed and the winner had long been known to everyone, and besides, it would depend on him who would be left alive. Suddenly, Douglas asked if anyone had a watch, saying he would start the timer because he was tired of waiting. After his words, the two guys said that they simply had no choice, and Alicia had a wealthy family that could provide her with a good life even without a pair of limbs. The girl herself found it very unpleasant to hear such words, but she understood perfectly well that their lives were at stake. Suddenly, Lewis approached her. Alicia asked him indifferently what he wanted. The guy whispered that she shouldn't worry. She just needed to hold on a little longer. The girl looked at him in surprise, asking what this meant, but Lewis just smiled back at her. Alicia said that he should have stayed in his hideout longer because the enemy now had one more hostage. The guy replied that he came to help. Hearing his words, everyone else looked at Lewis as if he was crazy. One of the men, a former bank employee, contemptuously asked if the guy wanted his hand as a thank you. Lewis ignored the question and turned to Alicia. He smiled and said that he and Ethan were now best friends. The next moment, Douglas destroyed one of the nearby tables, drawing attention to himself. Rubbing his neck, he said wearily that he would kill everyone here if they made him wait too long. The next moment, trembling with fear, everyone began to apologize to Alicia, saying that she should understand them. Without taking their eyes off the girl, they said that they simply had no other choice. Douglas turned to Lewis, asking whose side he was on. Smiling awkwardly, he replied that he would take Alicia's side. The man chuckled, then said that in that case he would also need a part of this guy's body as payment for saving one life. Everyone looked at each other excitedly when they heard that the number of those who could survive had increased to 10. Lewis smiled awkwardly, asking Alicia if she could protect them both. The girl called out to Douglas, calling him a North Korean puppet, and the man turned around, asking how much longer she would treat him so disrespectfully. Alicia ignored his question, asking what would happen if she simply killed all the hostages. Would he then leave her and Lewis alive? She argued that everyone should have a chance to survive. The next moment, Douglas's booming laughter echoed through the room. He said that Alicia was saying some rather interesting things. He accepted her offer, promising that he would let them live. Alicia gripped her sword, pointing it at the students standing in front of her. Seeing that she was serious, they cowered in fear. The girl said that she also had no other choice but to stay alive in this way. Catherine looked uncertainly from Alicia to Douglas. The man, smiling bloodthirstily, asked what everyone was waiting for. They just needed to choose, namely a part of Alicia and Lewis's body or their own heads. Catherine turned back, saying that in such a situation it would be fair to save the majority. She tried to convince Alicia that it was too selfish of her to kill them all for the sake of 2 lives. Alicia replied that she had no other choice, after which she created clones and ran towards Catherine. The girl activated her ability, creating a striking glove. As Alicia approached, she told her to fight with all her might. The next moment, she pointed the blade of the sword at Catherine. She clenched her fist, gathering all her strength. The next moment, her fist collided with Alicia's sword. As soon as the double was dispelled, the real Alicia appeared before the girl. Catherine recoiled, not understanding what had just happened. Pulling her towards her, Alicia delivered a powerful blow to her opponent's stomach. The next moment, she whispered in Catherine's ear so that she would listen to her carefully, after which she asked the girl for a favor. Catherine's eyes widened in surprise. When she finished, Alicia threw the girl towards the other hostages. Catherine showed no signs of life and lay unconscious. Everyone started discussing the fight they had just seen. Looking at Lewis, they decided that he would be easier to defeat than Alicia. Hearing their plan, the girl sighed heavily. The next moment, she stepped forward, telling Lewis to stay behind her. Watching this, Douglas could not hold back another burst of laughter, hiding his face with his hands. He looked up and said that this spectacle was becoming more and more exciting. Not everyone in that room shared his opinion, and they had to desperately cling to life playing by the rules of this crazy man. Alicia stood with her sword pointed towards her opponents, ready to repel their attack if they dared to attack her. Douglas, having recovered from his fit of laughter, shouted for them to amuse him further by killing each other. At that moment, an empty Coca-Cola can flew past him, attracting the man's attention. He turned around with a murderous look and asked what it was. However, there was no one behind him, only an open door leading to the stairs. Ethan, who threw the can, stood a little away from the entrance so that he could not be seen. He smiled bloodthirstily, glad that everything was going according to his plan. Douglas picked up the can, trying to figure out where it came from. Looking at this half-Coke can, Lewis immediately understood who exactly had thrown it there. The next moment, the man turned around and threw the can so that it bounced off and landed near the door. Douglas noticed the silhouette of a man at the entrance and, grinning, asked if he was Lewis's mysterious friend. Instead of answering, the boy attacked the man. Douglas dodged the weapon thrown at him, then asked irritably if he was suicidal for attacking him in such a way. However, when the man looked down to see what exactly he was being attacked with, he froze in place. He saw that these were torn-off parts from the masks of his subordinates, whom he had sent to explore the upper floors. Douglas looked again in surprise towards the door, where a few seconds ago an unknown young man stood, but he disappeared as suddenly as he appeared. He had absolutely no idea what was going on here. Grabbing his sword, Douglas thought that the boy had made a mistake in underestimating his opponent. The next moment, he slashed the air with his sword, putting all his strength into the blow. No one understood why Douglas was delivering powerful attacks, cutting through the air above him. A few moments later, he stopped and the ceiling suddenly began to collapse. Everyone watched in horror as the collapsed section of the ceiling fell on their heads. Alicia ran to the center of the room where the ceiling had collapsed, creating clones along the way. She made it in time, and she and her clones managed to hold that concrete layer over the hostages' heads before anyone got hurt. Douglas, without the slightest surprise in his voice, noted that the girl was very strong, after which he asked her to be patient a little because he needed to meet someone else. Alicia looked at him with hatred, not believing that he was actually going to kill them all. Coming to his senses, he looked at the girl and said that if even one person moved from the spot, then everyone would die. Just as the hostages relaxed and rejoiced that they were all saved, Douglas knocked the air out of their lungs again. Turning around, the man added that now was the perfect time to cut off Alicia's limbs. He advised them to think carefully about his words. At that moment, the girl asked him if he really thought she would just stand there and wait to be dismembered. With a mocking grin on his face, the man replied that if things were different, she would not be standing now with a heavy cloth on her shoulders, after which he said that he needed to leave for a while. Immediately after that, he jumped into the passage he had made in the ceiling with his own hands, flying floor after floor. Alicia and the rest of the students remained in their places, afraid to even move. Suddenly, the girl said that she wouldn't last long, and if they didn't want to die, then everyone should get out from under this piece of ceiling. Lewis ran up to the girl and shouted that everyone really needed to get out of there. However, a woman who came forward stopped the guys, saying that if everyone came out, they risked dying later at the hands of Alicia. Sean, who was trapped, shouted that if they stayed here, the boulder would crush them to death. Michael approached Lewis, telling him that he should step aside because Alicia had previously stated that she would kill them all, so now was their perfect chance to do it first. Lewis asked in bewilderment if no one had seen her rush to save people. He tried to explain to everyone that Alicia had not really intended to kill anyone, because if that were not the case, she would not be standing now holding up the collapsed ceiling. He suggested joining forces and running for the exit, even if there were enemies waiting for them outside. Together they could break through. Michael interrupted him, asking what would happen to them if Douglas decided to return at that moment. Catherine, who had come to her senses, intervened in their argument. The girl looked at Alicia, who was holding on with all her might. At the same time, Ethan heard footsteps behind him and turned around, saying that his guest was a little late. Looking around, Douglas asked if there was anyone else there besides them. He found it hard to believe that some schoolboy had taken on a squad of his best fighters single-handedly. Noticing that the man was staring at the corpses of his people, Ethan said that he had had a lot of fun with them. With a look full of madness, the boy said that he would have dealt with it faster if they had attacked him as a whole crowd at once. Smiling widely, the man thought that the girl he fought with earlier had impressed him greatly, but the guy standing in front of him had managed to completely outshine her. Douglas wondered where this monster had come from. Ethan ignored his question and ran his index finger along the blade of his dagger, a bloodthirsty smile on his face. Douglas extended his hand to the boy, asking if he wanted to join him. He even promised Ethan a good position if he accepted his offer. After his words, the hero put his palm to his face, carefully thinking about something. A few moments later, he broke into a happy smile, saying that it would be best to take the ninth path. Immediately after this, he took off, approaching Douglas through a zigzagging pattern. The man stood up when the boy was close enough. Seizing the right moment, Douglas attacked Ethan, but he dodged his sword. The man made several more attempts, but the hero never got hit by a single blow, jumping from side to side. Then Douglas decided to show the guy one of his trump cards, using one of the strongest attacks in his arsenal. However, this time too, our hero successfully escaped the attack by moving behind his opponent. Douglas didn't expect to hit the guy with his last attack, as it was done with a completely different purpose. Seeing Ethan running towards him, the man smirked. Thinking that the boy had fallen into his trap, no one knew that his ability allowed the sword to pass through surfaces. When the man activated his ability, Ethan had the opportunity to study it as he quickly approached his opponent. Once at a sufficient distance, the hero said with a smile that Douglas had a rather long name for his ability. The man froze for a few moments, not understanding where this bastard found out about his ability. This hesitation was enough for Ethan to push off from the sword and jump behind Douglas, asking along the way why the name was so long. The man remained motionless, trying to understand what had just happened. Having landed not far from him, the hero continued to bombard the man with questions. With his back to him, Douglas lowered the sword raised above his head. He asked Ethan if he was able to see other people's abilities, to which he received a positive answer. When the guy asked why he had several pluses near his rank and what the enhancement coefficient was, the man shuddered. He asked what the name of this annoying little rascal was. The hero, with a mad expression on his face, said his name, stretching out the syllables. After this, Douglas asked if his ability was related to vision and said that if he could really see the ranks and abilities of people, then Ethan would have no equal in his squad. The hero interrupted the man, saying that Douglas was the strongest person he had met in recent times. The man did not understand why he suddenly started talking about this and asked once again if the guy wanted to join him. Completely ignoring Douglas's words after looking closely at the man, Ethan said with displeasure that he only saw 9. Not understanding what the guy meant, the man asked what else he could see. The hero replied that he saw only 9 ways to kill him. The man was surprised that this guy could do even such things. Covering his face with his palm, he said that he envied Ethan. Having grabbed the dagger more comfortably, the hero said that one method would be enough for him to kill his opponent. The man chuckled and said he was sorry their talks had ended so quickly, after which they charged at each other with bloodthirsty smiles. At the same time, Glenn was hiding in the control room. He deliberately disabled the elevator so that he would not be found so quickly. He reasoned that this building was located in the city center, so a simple call would be enough and the police would immediately rush here. The guy decided to sit there a little longer because he might get into trouble if he left his shelter too early. Ethan rushed towards Douglas with a crazy grin. He read all the man's attacks and dodged them with ease. Now Ethan disappeared right from under Douglas's nose, making the man quite angry. He looked up and saw this guy sitting on the blade of his sword. Ethan smiled contentedly. He enjoyed making his victims angry. Gritting his teeth, the man shouted that the hero only knew how to dodge and then told him to attack. Ethan did as he was asked, jumping towards Douglas, aiming his dagger at his right eye. As the sharp blade almost caught up with him, the man managed to dodge at the last second. The hero flew past the man, landing a few meters away from him. Douglas managed to avoid losing an eye, but the guy managed to wound him in the shoulder. Ethan wasn't going to give the man time to rest, so he attacked his opponent again, surprising him. The hero rushed past the man at high speed, once again inflicting a deep cut on him. Ethan had no intention of stopping at just 2 wounds on the man's body, continuing his high-speed attacks. Shielding himself from Ethan's attacks with his sword, Douglas realized that the boy had been just having fun this whole time, mistaking him for a toy. During one of the next attacks, the hero asked in a bored voice whether he would receive a return attack from his opponent. Afterwards, he stopped in front of the man, saying that he was already bored with their game and it was time to end. Grinning, Douglas said that if he continued to hide his main trump card, he would definitely die here. The next moment, the man extended his hand towards Ethan, who noticed that it was wrapped in something strange. His eyes widened in surprise. He didn't expect Douglas to have such a surprise in store. He understood that if the man touched him, it would be bad, so the hero jumped back with lightning speed. Once at a safe distance, Ethan carefully examined the man standing opposite him, whose hand was wrapped in strange tentacles. The guy asked in bewilderment where Douglas got 2 abilities from, since a person can only have no more than 1, because everyone has only 1 soul. He tried to determine the level of this strange ability of the man, but all information about it was blocked. Ignoring his question, Douglas said that speed would no longer help Ethan. The hero asked where his opponent got such a strange hand. He grinned and asked why he was so interested in this. Ethan suggested that Douglas had become stronger with the help of this hand, and then, smiling bloodthirstily, said that now the real fun was finally about to begin. Pointing at Ethan, the man told him to stop acting like a fool because if he kept fighting like that, he would end up without a scratch. When the hero asked in surprise if Douglas was going to run away from him, the man smiled bloodthirstily, replying that he had not heard those words for a long time. Ethan wondered how his opponent had managed to escape from him. Grinning, Douglas replied that he had one option up his sleeve, after which he squeezed his sword tighter, saying that he would remember such an interesting opponent. The next moment, he pointed his sword upward and, using his ability, began to cut his way out. A few moments later, the roof of the bank building was breached. When this happened, the walls of the building shook as if from an earthquake. A huge hole appeared in the roof, passing through most of the floors of the bank. Hearing a loud sound, Glenn came out of his shelter and froze in shock when he saw the floor and ceiling pierced through. He walked closer and looked down, thinking that Alicia couldn't do something like that, so it was most likely Douglas's doing.